Chapter 475. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. The novel was also updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels were read for free. There are all kinds of connotations that you can't find online here. When Marquis Xianping came out of the palace, he was surprised to find a familiar carriage parked nearby. It was Princess Xinyang's carriage. His brows furrowed. He wasn't sure if the other party had entered the palace or what. If they weren't here to find him, then there was no need for him to ask for a rebuff. Just as he was thinking this, the curtain of Princess Xinyang's carriage was lifted from the inside. Eugene bowed and got off the carriage, walking towards Marquis Xianping. Marquis. Eugene bowed respectfully. The princess wishes to see you. That was a rare sight. After being married for so many years, the number of days that Princess Xinyang came to see him could be counted on one hand. He basically did not look for her. Ever since she had made a request on their wedding night, he had only maintained a superficial relationship with her. Marquis Xianping pondered for a moment, but still boarded Princess Xinyang's carriage. Marquis Xianping's carriage was also extremely luxurious, but the details were not as exquisite as Princess Xinyang's carriage. Princess Xinyang's carriage was obviously a woman's carriage, fragrant and exceptionally exquisite. If it was 20 years ago, Marquis Xianping would not be able to find a place to stay. Now, he was no longer the boorish fellow he used to be. He was also quite particular, elegant, calm, and refined. Well, at least on the surface. Marquis Xianping sat down on the bench next to Princess Xinyang. He raised his eyes and glanced at her, asking, "Is something the matter?" The Duke of Xinyang opened his mouth, a trace of hesitation passing through his brows. Marquis Xianping did not rush her. He casually picked up an orange and played with it in his hand. After a while, Princess Xinyang finally opened her mouth. "When did you know that there was a problem with the dragon shadow guard by my side? You came looking for me just to ask this? Answer me." "Not long after Xiao Qing's accident," Marquis Xianping said honestly. "Did you find something?" "No. On the contrary, I didn't find anything. That's why I found it strange. Your dragon shadow guard has always been in the shadows. But you already knew." "Yes." Xianping Ho did not deny it. From the first day Princess Xinyang married into the mansion, he had sensed several unusual auras in the dark. He had once felt a similar aura from the dragon shadow guard by the emperor's side, so he guessed that she also had a dragon shadow guard by her side. But their identities were confirmed on the night of Xiao Qing's accident. When he found out that the two children were poisoned, he immediately went to find the antidote. At that time, the emperor had an antidote pill from the Yan kingdom, which was said to be able to cure hundreds of poisons. Unfortunately, there was only one. Xiao Heng's mother did not hesitate to kidnap Xiao Qing in order to let him get the antidote. But when she was capturing Xiao Qing, she almost entered Princess Xinyang's room by mistake. At that time, a dragon shadow guard appeared and fought with her. "At that time Princess Xinyang's voice interrupted Marquis Xianping's thoughts, but she seemed to be hesitant. Marquis Xianping weighed the orange in his hand and said, "If you want to ask, just ask. You don't have to consider whether I want to answer or not. If I don't want to answer, I will tell you directly." Princess Xinyang said, "After you confirmed that the dragon shadow guard was the one who killed Xiao Qing, did you think about revenge?" Marquis Xianping faintly twitched his lips. "Would you believe me if I said I didn't?" Princess Xinyang pursed her lips. "Then why didn't you take revenge?" Marquis Xianping said seriously. "First of all, they were only executioners. The one who gave the order was the late emperor. There were only two people who could order the dragon shadow guard, the late emperor and Princess Xinyang. It couldn't have been Princess Xinyang who gave the order to kill her own son. It wasn't hard to come to this conclusion, but it was hard to accept it." Marquis Xianping chuckled. "Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. If I wanted to take revenge, I would go find the late emperor. Why would I make things difficult for a few executioners who only followed orders? Only a coward would vent his anger on a few subordinates instead of finding their master. This arrogant tone sounded like Marquis Xianping. Princess Xinyang said, "Just because of this?" Marquis Xianping looked at her strangely and smiled. "What are you expecting, Qin Fengwan? Expecting me to tell you that it was because you still needed them, so I reluctantly kept them? Qin Fengwan, I don't have as deep feelings for you as you think." "That's good." Princess Xinyang let out a sigh of relief. Marquis Xianping looked at her with a faint smile and narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, he leaned over and placed one hand on her side, as if pinning her against the wall of the carriage. "Qin Fengwan, you look very disappointed?" Princess Xinyang turned her face away. "I'm not." Marquis Xianping smiled carelessly, with a hint of coldness and mockery. "It's too late to be disappointed. You were the one who rejected this marquis. Now even if you put down your status to beg this marquis will not be tempted by you." After saying this, he coldly returned to his original seat. "Then, have you ever been tempted by me?" Princess Xinyang asked. Marquis Xianping's smile froze. "No," he said. "It's best if you haven't," Princess Xinyang said. "Don't like me. I won't like you." Marquis Xianping's expression turned cold. "Qin Fengwan, am I that bad?" Princess Xinyang lowered her eyes and tightly gripped her handkerchief under her wide sleeves. "It's not your problem. It's mine. I can't like any man." Marquis Xianping got off the carriage with a cold expression. Only when he was far away did Eugene get into the carriage. It was extremely difficult for Princess Xinyang to be alone with a man in this cramped space, even if this person was her husband of many years. She hid it very well on the surface, but the handkerchief in her hands had already been poked with several holes by her. "Princess, are you okay?" Eugene asked with concern. Princess Xinyang's face was smeared with a thick layer of makeup to cover her pale face. Otherwise, she would have been exposed long ago. "I'm fine." She took a deep breath. Although she said she was fine, her body began to tremble slightly. Eugene had always known that the princess had an unspeakable problem. She couldn't have normal contact with men, especially in cramped spaces. At her worst, she would suffocate. The reason why no one had discovered it before was mainly because she was a princess and had a noble status. If she didn't allow anyone to approach her, no one else could. Moreover, she was also very good at disguising herself. If Eugene hadn't seen her faint in the carriage with her own eyes, she feared that she wouldn't have known her secret. All these years, other than little Marquis, only Long he was allowed to stay close to her. Even the other 4 dragon shadow guards were not allowed to approach her without permission. In fact, after so many years, the princess's situation had already improved a lot. Last time, when she was in the same carriage with Marquis Xianping, she didn't have any discomfort. This time, could it be that Marquis Xianping took liberties with the princess? Jade Water Alley. The good news of Yao Shi's birth quickly spread in the alley. Everyone came to congratulate her one after another. Gu Yan and little Jing Kong each carried a basket of red eggs and went from house to hand them out. Marquis Gu didn't sleep the whole night and then looked after his son for the whole morning. At this moment, he was extremely tired and directly fell asleep beside Yao Shi. Yao Shi fed the child some milk and also couldn't resist the weakness of her body and fell asleep. In the end, she didn't have the energy like when she was young. At this time, Gu Jinyu came to Jade Water Alley. Last night, she was thrown out by Gu Jiao and was no longer able to enter the courtyard, so she returned to the Marquis's mansion first. Early in the morning, she heard the news from Huang Zhong that Yao Shi had given birth to a younger brother for her. She personally made soup to nourish Yao Shi's body. She carried the nourishing soup inside. "Mother, I'm here to see you." Mama Fang was bathing the little fellow. Hearing this, she raised her head and made a hush gesture. She whispered, "Madam is resting." "Ah." Gu Jinyu hurriedly covered her mouth with a guilty expression. There was a screen in front of Yao Shi's bed. Gu Jinyu stretched her head behind the screen to take a look. Yao Shi was sleeping very soundly. Marquis Gu was sitting on a chair with his upper body lying on the edge of the bed. He was also sleeping soundly. She quickly retracted her gaze and put the food box in her hand on the table. She curiously went to the basin and squatted down. Looking at the little fellow who was being fiddled with by Mama Fong, she said, "He's so small." Mama Fong said, "He's not small. He's white and chubby." "Don't you know how to speak? How is little master small? He's clearly a big fat boy." After Mama Fong finished bathing little master, she wiped him dry with a soft towel, put on some small clothes, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes. He didn't cry or make a fuss during the entire process. He was very obedient. Gu Jinyu widened her eyes and asked, "Mama, can I hold little brother? Do you know how to hold him?" Mama Fong asked. Gu Jinyu nodded. "I do. I've held little cousin of the Ling family many times." Mama Fong hesitated for a moment, then carefully handed the child to her. Gu Jinyu gently took the child and smiled as she looked at the little fellow in swaddling clothes. At this moment, something incredible happened. The little fellow, who didn't even cry when bathing or changing diapers, suddenly cried at the top of his lungs. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. The novel will be updated even faster. Millions of novels will be read for free. All the novels that can't be found online are available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642826/109791232. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuj mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 476. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more frequently. Millions of novels are free to read. There are novels with connotations that can't be found online here. Gu Jinyu was at a loss for what to do with the sudden crying. Nanny Fong was also shocked by the crying. Those who didn't know would think that Gu Jinyu was abusing the child. He was crying so heart-wrenchingly. Nanny Fong was rubbing the diaper, and her hands were wet. It wasn't appropriate for her to take the child, so she said to Gu Jinyu, "Put the young master in the cradle first." Gu Jinyu hurriedly put the child down. The child was crying too hard. Every cry sounded like someone was stabbing him with a needle. Gu Jinyu was so flustered that she lost her balance and stepped on the base of the cradle. She tripped and fell forward. The child in her hands also fell out. Her face turned pale. She wanted to catch the child, but it was too late. She fell hard on the ground. Her entire body was sore from the fall. One could imagine the terrible consequences of a newborn baby falling to the ground. At the critical moment, a blue figure flashed in and caught the baby that was about to fall to the ground at an extremely fast speed. The little fellow fell into a warm embrace, and his crying stopped abruptly. The little fellow opened his dark eyes wide and stared unblinkingly at the unfamiliar intruder. Nanny Fong heaved a sigh of relief. Second young master. Gu Jinyu endured the pain and stood up with the help of the cradle. She called out softly, "Second brother." Gu Chungfeng pinched the little fellow's face and nodded at Nanny Fong. He looked at Gu Jinyu and frowned. "Do you know how to carry a child?" Gu Jinyu's eyes reddened with grievance. "I didn't do it on purpose. I lost my balance." Gu Chungfeng originally had no feelings for Gu Jinyu. He didn't like her, but he didn't hate her either. He mostly ignored her. Now that he looked at her again, he didn't know why, but he kept comparing her with Gu Jiao. He felt that Gu Jinyu was a little lacking. If Gu Jiao was in the room today, she wouldn't have hurt the child no matter what. Gu Chingfeng ignored Gu Jinyu. He placed the little fellow in the cradle and opened the swaddling cloth to look at the little fellow's diaper. Realizing that the diaper was wet, he took a clean diaper from the table and quickly changed it for the little fellow. Even Nanny Fong couldn't compare to her speed in changing diapers. The little fellow seemed to be very comfortable after being swapped, and his little eyes narrowed in enjoyment. Gu Chingfeng's swaddling clothes were wrapped better than Nanny Fong's. who asked him to have a pair of godly hands. The dexterity of his hands was no less than that of a top surgeon. Of course, it was also because she always took care of Gu Chunlin when he was young, so she had some experience. Seeing that the second young master was so good at taking care of people, Nanny Fong felt relieved and went to rub the diapers. After she was done, she took all the diapers and clothes to the backyard to wash. Gu Jinyu looked at Gu Chingfeng, who was teasing the little fellow, and then looked at Nanny Fong, who left without saying a word. She felt that something was wrong. Nanny Fong and Gu Chingfeng didn't talk much. It seemed like they were neglecting each other, but it also seemed like they were used to Gu Chingfeng's appearance. "Does second brother come here often?" Gu Jinyu asked softly. Gu Chingfeng's fingers were firmly grasped by the little fellow. He didn't dare to pull his fingers out too forcefully for fear of hurting the little fellow. When he heard Gu Jinyu's question, he casually replied, "I've been here a few times." Most of the time, he came here to buy hair restorer. However, he also freeloaded a few meals, played a few rounds of cards, and lost some money to the old lady. Gu Jinyu saw that Gu Chengfeng was helpless because of the little fellow, and her eyes flickered. She said, "Second brother, are you also here to see mother?" Gu Chengfeng was actually here to buy hair restorer for Gu Chengfeng. He only knew that Madame Yao gave birth to a son when he saw Huang Zhong and Marquis Gu's carriage at the entrance. In terms of blood relations, this little fellow was his half-brother. He was just quite ugly. He was wrinkled and looked like a little monkey. "So ugly," he said disdainfully, not forgetting to poke the little fellow's face with his fingertip. He didn't know if it was because he felt Gu Chingfeng's disdain or because Gu Chingfeng's finger hurt him, but the little fellow suddenly pouted and burst into tears. Gu Chengfeng shuddered. "Not ugly, not ugly. You're very pretty." The little fellow sniffled and pouted. "Second brother, little brother likes you very much," Gu Jinyu said enviously. "He cries when I hug him. It's useless to coax him." How would a newborn know about liking or not liking? Although he said that, Gu Chengfeng unconsciously raised his brows. Did the little fellow like him more? The little fellow liked him? Really liked him? Ahem. Gu Chengfeng said seriously, "It must be because you don't know how to hug him. You're making him uncomfortable." What was so great about the little fellow liking him? He wasn't his half-brother from the same mother. He didn't care about his liking. Gu Jinyu was stunned. "Then, how do I hug him?" "Like this." Gu Chengfeng gently picked up the little fellow and demonstrated for Gu Jinyu to see. Gu Jinyu thought to herself, "That's how I hugged him just now." Gu Jinyu refused to believe it and decided to hug him again. In the end, the little fellow cried the moment she held him, but Gu Chengfeng took him from her. It made Gu Jinyu extremely embarrassed. What was even more embarrassing was yet to come. When Gu Jinyu hugged him, he peed. When Gu Jinyu hugged him again, he pooped. But she didn't know how to change diapers. She couldn't wash the little fellows, but clean, and made the little fellow cry loudly. In the end, Gu Chengfeng couldn't stand it anymore and took the child. "All right, you can leave. There's nothing for you to do here." Gu Jinyu was no longer the pampered young lady from before. She had been to Ciu village and done hard work, but she had never taken care of such a small child. She was really helpless. Moreover, she didn't know if it was just her imagination, but this child didn't seem to like her. The three little men who didn't like him at home were completely confirmed when they returned home. Gu Chengfeng carried the child to the west room. The three little men came to play with him one by one. The little fellow was very lazy and basically ignored them. But he also wouldn't cry. He wouldn't cry no matter who hugged him, except for Gu Jinyu. When Madame Yao woke up, Marquis Gu had already been summoned to the yamen. Gu Jinyu sat by her bed with red and swollen eyes. She looked at Gu Jinyu's aggrieved and hurt expression and couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" Gu Jinyu said with red eyes, "Younger brother doesn't like me." Madame Yao said, "How could he not like you? Such a small child. What did he know about liking or not liking?" Gu Jinyu said aggrievedly, "It's true. He cries when I hug him. He doesn't cry when other people hug him." "Then it must be because you don't know how to hug him." Madame Yao's words were exactly the same as Gu Qingfeng's. Madame Yao had Nanny Fong carry her son over from the West Room. After feeding the child, she handed him to Gu Jinyu. Try again. Gu Jinyu tried again. Something inconceivable happened. The little fellow, who had been wailing in her arms, suddenly became very quiet. Madame Yao smiled and said, "See, isn't this quite good?" Gu Jinyu was dumbstruck. "But just now Madame Yao said, "just now you must have felt uncomfortable hugging him." Gu Jinyu swore that she really had hugged him like that. He felt extremely comfortable. He just wanted to cry. Gu Jinyu bit his lip. Madame Yao looked at Gu Jinyu's aggrieved and angry appearance, but he was also holding back. She sighed slightly and said earnestly, "Jinyu, I know you have complaints in your heart. When Yen was young, he didn't like you. Whenever you approached him, he would cry. But that's because his older sister's aura had changed. You are very unfamiliar to him. He couldn't accept it, so he acted that way. Your second brother and Yen were born in different circumstances. He just came to this world. Jiao Jiao is his older sister, and so are you. As long as you treat him well, he will treat you like his own older sister. You must not be prejudiced against your second brother because of Yen's matter." "Mother, I'm not." Gu Jinyu really had unspeakable bitterness. When had she ever been prejudiced against her second brother? It was clear that her second brother hated her. "I'm going out for a while." Madame Yao needed to go to the toilet. With Nanny Fong's help, she went to the washroom. Once she left, the little fellow in her arms pursed his lips. Gu Jinyu carried the little fellow and stood up with a whoosh. "Mother, he's crying again." Madame Yao and Nanny Fong returned. The little fellow's mouth was wide open, and he yawned. Madame Yao said, "He's just yawning." Gu Jinyu refuted, "No, he was clearly about to cry just now." Madame Yao sighed and said, "He's very obedient." "He's not obedient. He hates it to death." Gu Jinyu was at a loss for words. She swore that she had not seen wrongly. This little fellow was about to cry just now. But when Madame Yao returned, he stopped crying. At this time, Gu Jiao did not know that Gu Jinyu had been repeatedly humiliated by the little fellow. She had just come out of the medical center. The critically ill patients who had fought in the casino yesterday had just passed the critical stage and were now being taken care of by Dr. Song and Dr. Liu. She went to the Liu residence. Lu Yisheng was very surprised to see her. "Is it convenient to go in?" Gu Jiao asked. "Ah, it's convenient." Lu Yisheng stepped to the side to let her in and opened the courtyard door wider. A white figure darted out and threw itself into Gu Jiao's arms. "Oh, little Shi." Gu Jiao hugged the heavy white cat ball. "You've gained weight again." Little Shi meowed. It was not fat at all." "Why are you here today?" Lu Yisheng asked. "I'm here to look for Yuan Tang," Gu Jiao said. "Did you hear that, cousin? She's here to look for me." Accompanied by a hearty voice, Yuan Tang swaggered out of the central room while fanning himself with a folding fan. He stood in front of Gu Jiao and knocked the white cat's head with his fan. He snorted, "You heartless little thing. Why don't I see you being so enthusiastic when I come over?" Little Shi threw itself into Gu Jiao's arms and slapped Yuan Tang's, but Lu Yisheng looked at Yuan Tang with a cold gaze. Yuan Tang automatically ignored his cousin's piercing gaze and smiled at Gu Jiao. "Tell me, why are you looking for this prince? It better not be a matter between a man and a woman. Otherwise, cousin will get jealous. I promised cousin that I only have him in my heart." Lu Yisheng really wanted to throw this guy out. "It's business," Gu Jiao said. Yuan Tang let out a sigh of relief. "Do you want to talk in the courtyard or in the house?" He spoke like a master. "Either is fine," Gu Jiao said. There were no outsiders in Lu Yisheng's house. There was only a mute slave and an elderly nanny, both of whom were trustworthy. It was autumn today, so it was the best time to bask in the sun in the courtyard. They finally sat down on the stone bench. Yuan Tang and Gu Jiao faced each other, while Lu Yisheng sat in between them. Lu Yisheng was in no hurry to sit down. He went into his room and brought out a plate of fresh tangerines. Yuan Tang's eyes widened when he saw the plump and bright tangerines. "Cousin, you're too biased. Did you have so many delicious tangerines? I've been here for so long, but I haven't seen you take them out." After he said this, his handsome face became extremely bitter. He said to Lu Yisheng, "Peel one tangerine for me, and I'll forgive you." Lu Yisheng really did peel a tangerine, but it wasn't for him. "Nanny here." "Yuan Tang. That hurts." Gu Jiao also peeled a tangerine and fed it to little Shi. She had never raised a cat before, so she didn't know if other people's cats ate tangerines. In any case, little Shi ate it. "Hey, didn't you say you wanted to talk to me about something? What is it?" Yuan Tang was hurt by his cousin's words, so his tone was gloomy. Gu Jiao said, "Do you know that Chen's army is heading southwest?" Yuan Tang's eyes suddenly flashed with vigilance. "Why are you asking this?" Gu Jiao fed another tangerine to the white cat on her lap. "Just tell me if you know." Yuan Tang gave Gu Jiao a deep look. He opened his folding fan and fanned himself. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Although I am a hostage here, I have spies. There was a mutiny at the Chen nation's border. My royal uncle led the army to quell the chaos." Gu Jiao removed the tangerine rings from a tangerine. "Quell it? What a good excuse." In the dream, Chen's army only headed southwest after the New Year. In February, they captured Princess Ning and the old duke. In March, they captured Gu Qingfeng. In April, Gu Chongqing led 100,000 Gu soldiers north. In May, the frontier fortress was still covered in snow. In June, 80,000 Gu soldiers were annihilated. It was only October. It seemed that it was brought forward again. Yuan Tang frowned. "What do you mean?" Gu Jiao looked at him with pity and sighed. "It seems that you still don't know." This gaze made Yuan Tang frown even more. "What don't I know?" Gu Jiao looked away and continued to remove tangerine rings. "The two countries are going to war. As a hostage, you will soon lose your value." Yuan Tang closed his folding fan. Nonsense. These two sentences were nonsense. The reason why Chen sent its prince to Zhao as a hostage was to show its determination to surrender and ask for peace. If they dared to send troops to Zhao again, Zhao would definitely kill Yuan Tang. When Marquis Xianping sent troops to Chen, he first rescued An Junwang before sending troops. However, Chen's army had already advanced to the frontier fortress of Zhao, but Yuan Tang didn't make any moves. It was clear that Yuan Tang had been abandoned by Chen. To be more precise, he had been abandoned by his royal uncle of the state of Chen. Yuan Tang had always been good-tempered, but at this moment, he couldn't help but get angry. "Hey, don't talk nonsense here just because you have some friendship with me. You are trying to sow discord between my relationship with my father." Gu Jiao spread her hands. "It has nothing to do with your father. It's your uncle who wants to rebel. You can't be the crown prince of Chen anymore." When Yuan Tang heard that it wasn't his father, he subconsciously felt less repulsed. However, he still frowned and asked, "Which uncle of mine?" Gu Jiao said, "How do I know which uncle is the one who led the troops to quell the rebellion?" In fact, she knew. However, she wanted to know if Yuan Tang knew. Yuan Tang pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he got angry. "Are you talking about Prince Bo's uncle? That's impossible. He and my father are of the same mother. He is my father's most trusted brother. Even if there's a rebellion, it's impossible for him to do so." "Is that so?" Gu Jiao raised her eyebrows. Yuan Tang firmly believed that his uncle wouldn't rebel. "Besides, this time, my grandfather and uncle went with him. Even if my uncle wanted to rebel, they wouldn't sit idly by." Gu Jiao said, "Oh, what if they rebelled with your uncle?" Yuan Tang looked at Gu Jiao like she was a fool. "Why would my grandfather do that? What good would it do him?" Gu Jiao ignored his contempt and calmly said, "This is your Rong family's business. If it weren't for Prince Bo and the Rong family, how could the Gu family's army suffer such a big loss?" Yuan Tang felt that Gu Jiao was talking nonsense. "I don't believe it. Where did you hear this gossip? It's up to you to believe it or not. Gu Jiao didn't say anything. Originally, her purpose of coming here wasn't to make Yuan Tang believe anything, but to determine whether her dream was brought forward or not. Her purpose had been achieved. Out of morality, she gave him a kind reminder. It was best if he believed it, but if he didn't, she would think of another way and no longer care about him. How's your finger? Gu Jiao looked at Lu Yisheng. Lu Yisheng's eyes moved and said, "It's much better." "Let me see." Gu Jiao reached out her hand. Lu Yisheng hesitated for a moment before putting his finger into her palm. She gently pinched the stitched wound. "Does it still hurt?" "It doesn't hurt anymore." "It was a little itchy." Lu Yisheng lowered his eyes. Gu Jiao hooked his finger. She was testing his strength. Lu Yisheng clearly understood that her identity was only a doctor, but this action was too intimate for him. His breathing stopped for a moment. "Does it hurt?" Gu Jiao asked. No. Lu Yisheng quickly denied it. You've recovered quite well." Gu Jiao didn't think too much. She let go of Lu Yisheng's hand and lowered her head to stroke her cat. She stroked until her eyes narrowed in enjoyment. Lu Yisheng looked at this Gu Jiao. The young girl under the sun was bright and moving. She didn't show the slightest bit of fear because of the birthmark on her face. She lived openly, like the hottest sun in the sky. Gu Jiao stroked the cat until she was satisfied before standing up to leave. On the way, she kept thinking about the previous dynasty's remnants and the pirates on the sea. The two had happened at almost the same time. She felt that it wasn't a coincidence. It was like someone had deliberately stirred up trouble on the island to draw away Marquis Xianping. Afterwards, they moved against Marquis Ding and Fu and the Gu family army. This was a great conspiracy against the country of Zhao. Destroying the Gu family army was like cutting off an arm of the country of Zhao. However, Gu Jiao faintly felt that things weren't that simple. Those people's actions towards the old Marquis and Gu Chungfeng, as well as cutting off Gu Changqing's legs, were not as simple as destroying them. It was more like a strong form of revenge and humiliation. Had the Gu family offended the previous dynasty's remnants? Imperial concubine Jing was a remnant of the previous dynasty, but her death couldn't be considered the responsibility of the Gu family, right? Gu Jiao didn't understand the crux of the matter at the moment. Of course, it was also possible that the so-called revenge and humiliation was just a misconception. She just didn't know if the previous dynasty's remnants had really colluded with the pirates on the sea. She hoped that they hadn't. That way, the pirates wouldn't cause trouble earlier and Marquis Xianping would still have time to head north. If Marquis Xianping headed north, the morale of the Chun army would drop by at least half. Unfortunately, reality was cruel. That very night, an urgent report came from Nanhai City. The pirates in Nanhai City had caused trouble, the island had been lost, and the governor of the navy had been killed. They were requesting reinforcements from the imperial court. When the news reached the imperial palace, the emperor and Gu Jiao were both at Rinshou Palace. Neither her grandaunt nor the emperor avoided Gu Jiao, allowing her to hear the report from the guard and their views on the matter. The emperor was at his wits' end. Governor Liao was killed, and the navy is without a leader. The deputy generals are too young to control the situation. The imperial court does have a few experienced generals, but they aren't familiar with the navy. I remember that Marquis Xianping served in the navy for a few years? Empress Dowager Zhuang asked. Ah yes. The emperor clearly just remembered. When he was young, he followed his uncle to Nanhai City to take up a post, and became the commander of the navy. If Marquis Xianping had stayed in Nanhai City, he could have become the governor of the navy. Unfortunately, he came back. He came back to marry Princess Xinyang. It was just that no one had expected that such a good marriage would end up like this. Actually, the emperor paused and explained Gu Changqing's whereabouts. Gu Changqing is near Fengdu Mountain, less than 10 days' journey from Nanhai City. Gu Changqing had gone to Fengdu Mountain to take over the 30,000 imperial guards that the old marquis had secretly trained. That was the imperial family's life-saving talisman. Originally, it had been used to deal with Empress Dowager Zhuang. Now, there was no need. However, he wouldn't use it lightly. Empress Dowager Zhuang didn't ask why Gu Chongqing had gone to Fengdu Mountain. She only continued the matter of Nanhai City. He has no experience with the Navy, and his qualifications are too shallow. It will be difficult to convince the masses. There was a great difference between the Navy and the Army. Gu Chongqing was an outstanding Army general, but his fighting style was not necessarily suitable for the Navy. Furthermore, the Navy was a local army. It was much more cunning than the Army in the capital. It was common to overtly comply but covertly oppose, pulling people into the water and using underhanded methods that made people unable to say anything. It really did take a tyrant and scoundrel like Marquis Xianping to let them see what it meant to be 1 foot tall and the devil 10. The emperor nodded. Mother's words are very true. Gu Jiao listened to the side and understood that Marquis Xianping had gone south. Digression. There are still a few days until the new year. Hurry up and cast this year's monthly ticket. By next year, it will be old. The latest chapter of this book is not finished. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_8964286/109764624. HTML Genius remembers this site's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikugo mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 477. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all available here. Gu Jiao came out of Rinshou Palace and happened to bump into Yujin, who had gone to greet Empress Xiao. Aunt Yujin. Gu Jiao greeted her. Yujin smiled in surprise. Dr. Gu, are you here to visit the Empress Dowager? Since Princess Xinyang had investigated Gu Jiao, it was impossible that she didn't know her relationship with Empress Dowager Zhuang. Gu Jiao nodded. Did the princess also enter the palace? She asked. No, only I entered the palace. The empress summoned me. The princess. Yujin smiled helplessly and didn't hide anything from Gu Jiao. The empress wanted to know about the young marquis, but the princess didn't want to talk about it. She said she was sick and stayed in the house. She told me to report to the empress. As for when the empress asked Yujin, Yujin only said she was a servant and didn't know anything. Empress Xiao could torture others, but not Yujin. First, Yujin didn't do anything wrong. Second, Yujin was Princess Xinyang's confidant. If Empress Xiao dared to touch her, Princess Xinyang wouldn't let it go. They were a family. There was no need to make a scene like that. The two walked towards a palace gate together. Gu Jiao didn't like to pry into other people's privacy. But after Yujin confirmed Xiao Liulong's identity, she didn't treat Gu Jiao as an outsider. She took the initiative to tell Gu Jiao, actually, the princess and the empress aren't very close. She used the word close after careful consideration and beautification. In fact, the relationship between the two was very cold. The reason was that Marquis Xianping and Princess Xinyang didn't get along. As Marquis Xuanping's sister, Empress Xiao naturally wouldn't blame her brother. So she had some prejudice against Princess Xinyang. Princess Xinyang wasn't the kind of person who would kiss someone's butt. This led to the current situation between the two. Alas, Eugene sighed. Both the Empress and the Princess dote on the young Marquis very much. When the young Marquis was around, the two of them would occasionally talk to each other. Ever since the young Marquis got into trouble, the Empress and the Princess have not been in contact with each other much. The only time they met was when Princess Xinyang returned to the capital and entered the palace to greet the emperor and empress. However, this was not a sister-in-law relationship, but a formality between a ruler and a minister. Eugene and Gu Jiao didn't say this because they hoped that Gu Jiao would help them deal with anything, nor did they want to remind Gu Jiao not to say anything that Princess Xinyang didn't say to Gu Jiao. She was purely gossiping with Gu Jiao. Gu Jiao was a very good listener. First, there was Consort Rui Wang, and then there was Eugene. They were all very willing to share their worries with Gu Jiao. As the two of them chatted, they unknowingly arrived at the entrance of the palace. Gu Jiao had come in Xiao Sanzi's carriage. Unfortunately, Xiao Sanzi's carriage had broken down and the wheels were a bit loose. He was currently squatting on the ground to fix it. Eugene said to Gu Jiao, "Dr. Gu, I'll send you back." Gu Jiao did not refuse. She said a few words to Xiao Sanzi and sat in Eugene's carriage. She could see that Eugene was still gossiping and still wanted to talk to her. After sitting in the carriage, Eugene thought of something and asked Gu Jiao, "That's right, is the Marchioness about to give birth?" Gu Jiao said, "She already gave birth." Eugene was startled and asked, "Didn't you say next month? She gave birth so quickly? Is it a son or a daughter? Is everything all right?" This all clearly included Yao Shi as well. Gu Jiao nodded gratefully. "It's a son. Both mother and child are safe." Eugene smiled happily. "That's great. This joyous news must be told to the princess. Dr. Gu, do you mind going to Vermilion Bird Street?" "All right," Gu Jiao said. Eugene was not someone who only knew how to gossip about her own matters. She was also very concerned about Gu Jiao's situation. On the road, she asked almost all of the questions related to the little fellow and Yao Shi. Gu Jiao did not speak much and answered very concisely. People who did not understand her would think that she was being perfunctory. However, Eugene understood that she answered every question seriously. Eugene liked this kind of girl. She did not play tricks, did not flatter, and did not act courteously. All of her friendliness and appreciation were hidden in her details. The carriage entered Vermilion Bird Street. Eugene lifted the curtain to take a look and discovered that there seemed to be a carriage parked in front of her courtyard. That carriage looks a little familiar," Eugene muttered to herself. Gu Jiao followed her gaze and said, "It's Marquis Xianping's carriage." This carriage would occasionally appear at the medical clinic, the Imperial College, and Jade Water Alley. Gu Jiao had long memorized its appearance. Eugene was even more confused. Why would the Marquis come here? Based on their relationship as husband and wife, they would usually find someone to pass on a message. The number of times they would actively seek each other out could be counted on one hand, especially for Marquis Xianping. He probably understood that Princess Xianyang did not want to see him, so he never went in front of Princess Xianyang to ask for a rebuff. In reality, Marquis Xianping was just passing by today. He did not plan on finding Princess Xianyang. However, he heard Princess Xianyang's pitiful cries. It seemed that something had happened. He followed the sound to the attic of the study. Princess Xianyang was sitting on the ground. Her right foot was pressed down by a fallen bookshelf. The attic was cramped. She could not retreat or stand up. Marquis Xianping bowed and entered the attic. With Princess Xianyang's height, she could stand up straight at the highest point in the attic, but Marquis Xianping was too tall. He had to crouch the entire time. He removed the heavy bookshelf and the books that had fallen to the ground. Blood was seeping out of her shoes. It seemed that she had suffered a serious injury. Marquis Xianping frowned. "How come I don't see your dragon shadow guards? Are they all incompetent?" He had rushed over from the streets. Although he was not very slow, the distance was there. During this time, her dragon shadow guards had the time to rescue her. It was funny. She knew that someone would save her, but she still came. But the dragon shadow guards that should have appeared did not appear. This made Marquis Xianping not know what to say for a while. Should he say that fortunately he came? How could Princess Xianyang know that so many thoughts flashed through his mind? Long Yi had gone out to handle some matters. As for the other 4 dragon shadow guards, she did not bring them to the capital. Seeing that she did not answer, Marquis Xianping did not force her to answer. He knelt down on one knee, intending to look at her injuries. However, she suddenly said, "Don't come over." Fine. Although they were husband and wife, they had only slept together once in so many years. Being together with her, he still had to talk about the difference between men and women. "Fuck. Your injuries are not light," Marquis Xianping said. With this amount of blood, there was at least an inch-long wound. Marquis Xianping thought about it. Saving people was more important, so he still had to get her down. Marquis Xianping reached out to carry her. Princess Xian Yang's reaction was even greater. She suddenly dodged to the side. Marquis Xianping's hand froze in midair. He looked at her strangely and said, "I'm just carrying you down. I have no other intentions. You make it seem like this marquis wants to take advantage of you." This loft was too small, so small that she had nowhere to retreat to. The distance between them was also too close, so close that she was surrounded by his masculine scent. Her face paled, and her forehead began to seep out fine beads of cold sweat. Marquis Xianping quickly sensed her abnormality. His thick brows knitted even tighter, and he said impatiently and self-deprecatingly, "Qin Fengwan, this marquis does not eat people." Princess Xian Yang did not answer him. At first, Marquis Xianping thought that she disdained to talk to him, but he gradually discovered that her body was trembling and her lips were pale. "Qin Fengwan." He looked at her inquiringly. Don't come over. I'm begging you," Princess Xian Yang said in a pleading tone. Marquis Xianping had known Princess Xian Yang for so many years, but he had never seen her lower her voice to anyone. Strictly speaking, she was not lowering her voice right now, but she was sincerely begging him not to come near her. "Do you hate me that much?" Marquis Xianping stared at her and instantly denied this thought. Compared to disgust, it was more appropriate to say that her reaction was fear. Marquis Xianping didn't understand what he had to be afraid of. Last time, she had chased him down from the roof on the street, and he had personally caught her. Wasn't she fine? She had even coldly ordered him to put her down. Where did her arrogance go? Although Marquis Xianping had doubts in his heart, Princess Xian Yang's condition was not optimistic. Marquis Xianping seriously suspected that if he didn't go out, she would suffocate here. Marquis Xianping went down the loft. Coincidentally, Yujin and Gu Jiao entered the courtyard at this time. "Marquis." Yujin bowed. Marquis Xianping looked at her, and then at Gu Jiao beside her. "The princess is in the loft. She's injured. Go take a look." There was only the study and loft in the entire courtyard. After hearing Marquis Xianping's words, Yujin didn't care about anything else and hurriedly took Gu Jiao to the loft. When Princess Xian Yang saw the two of them, she secretly sighed in relief. The suffocating dizziness finally subsided. "Princess." Yujin knelt by her side and supported her, letting her lean into her arms. Gu Jiao examined Princess Xian Yang's wounds. They were all superficial wounds. There were 2 wounds in total, and one of them was a bit deep. Gu Jiao took out a small medicine box from the small basket on her back and took out some disinfectant to clean the wounds. Princess Xian Yang's complexion was very poor. Gu Jiao originally thought it was because of the pain, but when she disinfected her wounds, her complexion actually improved a bit. So it wasn't because she was afraid of pain. "Is the princess feeling unwell somewhere else?" Gu Jiao asked. When she first came in, Princess Xian Yang's complexion looked as if she couldn't breathe. Princess Xian Yang was extremely intelligent. How could she not know why Gu Jiao asked this question? She lowered her eyes, her eyelashes trembling. She shook her head and said, "No, I'm much better." Gu Jiao's hand, which was wrapping gauze around her, paused. "Okay, don't let the wounds get wet." After treating Princess Xian Yang's wounds, Gu Jiao carried her down the loft. When they returned to the room, Yujin took out clean clothes for Princess Xian Yang to change into. Marquis Xianping didn't leave. He hesitated, but still went to Princess Xian Yang's room. Gu Jiao left, and Yujin went to see her off. Inside the room, Princess Xian Yang sat on the soft bed, her back leaning against the cushion at the head of the bed. She was reading a book, bored to death. Her complexion had recovered, and there was no trace of her previous embarrassment. "Is something the matter?" Princess Xian Yang glanced at him and said lightly. "Fine, she's back to the old Xian Yang." Marquis Xianping pulled a chair over and sat beside her bed. He looked at her without blinking. "Qin Fengwan, what's wrong with you?" Princess Xian Yang didn't look at him. Her gaze was still on the book of poems she was reading. "What do you mean, what's wrong with me?" Marquis Xianping stared straight at her face, not letting go of any of her subtle expressions. "You weren't right in the loft." Princess Xian Yang said perfunctorily. "I was in pain." "You call that pain?" Marquis Xianping furrowed his brows impatiently and pointed at himself. "Or do you think that after fighting for half my life, I can't even differentiate between pain and fear? You're afraid of me, Qin Fengwan." Princess Xian Yang pursed her lips. Marquis Xianping was puzzled. "I didn't do anything to you, right? Do you need to be so afraid of me? I don't usually see you being afraid. You're not afraid now either. So why are you so afraid just in the loft?" As if to confirm his guess that she wasn't afraid of him, he leaned in front of her. Princess Xian Yang didn't speak. Marquis Xianping's gaze moved from her face to her hands. She was holding the book, and her knuckles were faintly white. Marquis Xianping sat back on the chair and distanced himself from her. He didn't think he had done anything to arouse her wariness. Between them, she was the one who was ready to raise her butcher's knife at any time. She was the one who wasn't allowed to touch him, and she was the one who took the initiative to touch him. But she was even afraid of him, and she was only afraid in the loft. Marquis Xianping narrowed his eyes and asked seriously, "Did someone bully you, Qin Fengwan?" "I'm tired." Princess Xian Yang closed the book of poems in her hands and tactfully asked him to leave. Marquis Xianping wanted to ask more, but Steward Lu's voice came from the courtyard. "Marquis, Marquis, Her Majesty summons you." Marquis Xianping felt Princess Xian Yang's body relax when she heard this. He looked at her deeply. She raised her chin and stubbornly held on like a proud peacock, but her slightly trembling eyelashes and bloodless lips betrayed her. Marquis Xianping's eyes darkened. He stood up and looked at her. His hands didn't stop moving as he put the chair back to its original position. "Qin Fengwan." He called her name, but she didn't respond. He retracted his gaze with a complicated expression, turned around, and walked out. The latest chapter of this book isn't finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. The novel will be updated even faster. Millions of novels will be read for free. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_8964226/10973991. HTML Genius will remember this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuga mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 478. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that cannot be found online are all available here. When Marquis Xianping entered the palace, he received an imperial edict to go south immediately. The emperor appointed him as the Southern Patrol Imperial Envoy, temporarily acting as the governor of the South Sea City Navy. He must eliminate the bandits as quickly as possible and at the lowest cost, and take back the South Sea City Island. Marquis Xianping led 500 light cavalry out of the capital that night. Chang Jing was also in the ranks. After Gu Jiao came out of Princess Xinyang's residence, She took the carriage arranged by Yujin and returned to Jishui Alley. The house was very lively. The neighbors all came to see the baby. This really was a well-behaved and beautiful baby. Eunuch Qin and Eunuch Wei also came. Gu Jiao entered the palace, this time to report the good news to her grandaunt and the emperor. Because of the bandits at sea, the two elders had gathered their important officials overnight for a meeting. They could not personally visit the baby in Jishui Alley, so they let Eunuch Qin and Eunuch Wei come. You've been holding him for an hour. Let me hold him too. In the West Room, Eunuch Qin said to Eunuch Wei with hidden bitterness. Eunuch Wei turned his back to avoid Eunuch Qin's outstretched claws. He rudely said, "No." He snatched it first, and he snatched it from Sixth Aunt's hands. Heaven knows how much he paid for it. You can come again next time. Eunuch Wei was determined not to give up the baby. Eunuch Qin was so angry that he ground his teeth. Little guy, after following the emperor, did he forget who was the #1 eunuch in the harem? Eunuch Wei did not care. If he did not want to give it up, he would not give it up. Eunuch Qin could not snatch it up. If he hurt the baby, wouldn't Empress Dowager Zhuang twist his head? Eunuch Qin tempted. Let me hold him. Later, I'll send Daquan over for you to play with for 2 days. Daquan was Eunuch Qin's little tortoise. Eunuch Wei had been eyeing him for a long time. Eunuch Wei said without hesitation, "Go, go, go." With a baby, who would want your tortoise? The main reason was that he coveted Eunuch Qin's tortoise, not for fun, but to stew tortoise soup. In the end, Eunuch Qin failed to snatch Eunuch Wei, which made Eunuch Wei, who had always been suppressed by Rinshou Palace, feel proud and elated. The battle for the treasure only ended when little Jing Kong came back from the Imperial College. Once little Jing Kong appeared, the two of them basically had no chance. Who could snatch it from him? Little Jing Kong did not know how to carry a baby. He placed the baby in the cradle. It was worth mentioning that he was not as tall as the cradle, so he had to move a small stool and stand on it to look at his little brother. Disciple's nose is like mine, my mouth is like mine, my eyes are like mine, and my eyebrows are like mine. Little Jing Kong puffed up his chest, shook his head, and said proudly, "What a handsome little man." Everyone, at the end of the day, you just want to praise yourself, right? During postpartum confinement, babies only ate and slept, so they did not respond well to little Jing Kong's teasing. Little Jing Kong played for a while. Then his little brother lost interest and went back to the alley for a walk. Yao Shi temporarily lived in the East Room. She did not have enough breast milk, so Auntie Lu introduced her to a wet nurse. The wet nurse was an honest person. She was a few years younger than Yao Shi and gave birth around the same month as her sister-in-law, so she handed her child over to her sister-in-law to feed. She moved over and lived in Yao Shi's original room. She mainly fed the child at night. If the child did not have enough to eat during the day, she would eat 1 or 2 more meals. Little Jing Kong was the happiest when he learned that Gu Jiao would be sleeping in the West Room later. I can sleep with Jiao Jiao. He washed himself until he smelled good, combed his buzz, cut hair until it was shiny, and went to the West Room valiantly. Jiao Jiao, I'm coming. He kicked off his shoes and climbed onto the bed. Unexpectedly, before he could climb onto the bed, he was lifted up by his bad brother-in-law. Xiao Hung said, "Go sleep with great-granduncle." Little Jing Kong struggled and said, I don't want to. I want to sleep with Jiao Jiao." Even if he did not want to, he had to. Little Jing Kong was mercilessly dragged to the next room by his bad brother-in-law. When Gu Jiao returned to the West Room after her shower, the quilt on the bed was already made. There was only one bed. Little Jing Kong was not there, but Xiao Hung was there. However, he was packing his own sleeping clothes. "Aren't you going to sleep?" Gu Jiao asked. She had just taken a shower and hadn't had time to dry her hair. She wrapped a piece of dry cotton cloth around her head, leaving only a strand of wet hair hanging by her ear. Sparkling and translucent water droplets dripped onto her fair neck. It was a little tempting. Xiao Hung coughed softly and looked away. He looked at the sleeping clothes in his hands and said, "Jing Kong and I will sleep over there. Gu Jiao looked at the bed in the west room. Well, the bed was indeed a little small for 3 people. Actually, it was not a matter of whether the bed was small or not, but Xiao Heng looked at her body that was getting better day by day. It was especially hard to calm down in the dead of night. He took a deep breath and eliminated the thoughts that were surging in his sea of consciousness. He said seriously, "It's getting late. You should rest early. Remember to dry your hair." "Okay." Gu Jiao nodded and took the cotton towel off her head. Her long black hair fell down and covered her shoulders, which made her delicate skin as white as snow. Xiao Heng only took one look at her and felt his blood boil. He was worried that he would do something irreversible if he did not leave now. "I'm going over." After saying that, he quickly walked out of the room and almost fled. Gu Jiao made a strange sound. "You're leaving so quickly. I still want to ask you about the princess." Princess Xian Yang's reaction in the attic was clearly abnormal. Her first reaction was claustrophobia, but if she had claustrophobia, why would she go to the attic? Why would she be fine sitting in a carriage? Gu Jiao could not understand. "Jiao Jiao, are you asleep?" It was Yao Shi's voice. Gu Jiao put down the cotton towel in her hands and walked over to open the door. "I'm not asleep. Why did you get out of bed?" "It's fine. I'm fine. I also got out of bed to walk around during the day." Yao Shi's labor this time took longer than last time, but the process was not as painful. "Come in. It's cold outside," Gu Jiao said to Yao Shi. Yao Shi entered the room and sat down on the bed. She pulled her daughter's hand and warmly said, "Your second brother came by." Gu Jiao made no sound and said, "He came to buy hair growth medicine." Did Gu Chunglin run out of hair growth medicine again? Had he used it too quickly? "He also came to give you something." As Yao Shi spoke, she handed the brocade box in her hands to her. Gu Jiao took the brocade box. "This is from him?" Yao Shi smiled and nodded. "I don't know what it is." "Open it and take a look." Gu Jiao opened the box. Inside was a bag of dried meat. It was Gu Jiao's favorite flavor. Gu Jiao normally did not express her preferences. It was only Xiao Heng who was careful enough to notice that she liked dried meat. Had she ever eaten it in front of Gu Chengfeng? Gu Jiao did not have any recollection of it. "Your 3 brothers." Yao Shi wanted to say something, but stopped. She did not know what to say. She and the 3 sons that the previous madam had left behind had indeed been very unhappy, but that was all in the past. Moreover, they had been bewitched by concubine Mother Ling. What could little children understand? It was nothing more than what the adults taught them. It was true that there were some things that she could not forgive, but sometimes she had to learn to accept and accept. They had hurt Gu Yan, but they had also saved Gu Yan. If it was not for the fact that she had to distinguish which of the 3 brothers had done the most wrong and which of them had done the most, it was meaningless. No matter what, they were her daughter's blood relatives in this world. If there came a day when they, the elders, were no longer around, her daughter would at least have her older brothers to love her. Gu Jiao raised her eyebrows and said, "All right, since he gave me a gift, next time I'll sell him the hair growth agent at a cheaper price." Yao Shi could not help but smile. Over the next few days, Gu Jiao frequently went in and out of the imperial palace. She wondered if she should remind her grandaunt that there might be a lot of Qin country soldiers at the border. Reality proved that Empress Dowager Zhuang was able to command the court for many years without relying on a trace of luck. The moment Empress Dowager Zhuang discovered the bandits in Nanhai City, she immediately sent a messenger pigeon to Tang Yushan, telling him to investigate the movements of the Qin country's army. Tang Yushan's messenger pigeon arrived at Rinshou Palace 5 days later. The letter said that after Tang Yushan received Empress Dowager Zhuang's message, he immediately led people to infiltrate the Qin country's border and discovered that the Qin country had secretly brought 80,000 soldiers. The Qin country's border was in chaos. Logically, 10,000 soldiers should have been enough. Why did they need 80,000? Empress Dowager Zhuang immediately guessed that they were going to war with the Zhao country again. This time, they had chosen to do it near the border. It was highly likely that they had colluded with the remnants of the previous dynasty of the Zhao country. Inside Rinshou Palace, after hearing Empress Dowager Zhuang's analysis, the emperor frowned. Yuan Tang is still in the Zhao country. Is the Qin country's ruler crazy? He doesn't even want his own son's life. Guards, arrest Yuan Tang for Zhun. Not long after, eunuch he came to report, Your Majesty, Yuan Tang has escaped. The emperor angrily said, Escaped? Seal the city gates for Zhun. Zhun wants to see where he can run to. Empress Dowager Zhuang didn't care much about Yuan Tang. Since the Qin country dared to send troops at this juncture, it meant that they had given up on Yuan Tang. It didn't matter whether they arrested him or not. She pinched her sore eyebrows, stood up, and paced back and forth in the room. Qin country's 80,000 soldiers and the remnants of the previous dynasty's 50,000 soldiers. She closed her eyes. The border was in danger. What happened next confirmed Empress Dowager Zhuang's guess. Urgent news from the border. Princess Ning was arrested. The old duke was also arrested by the remnants of the previous dynasty in order to save Princess Ning, and the Qin country's army entered the border. Tang Yushan's army was defeated. The border lost 3 cities in a row. 3 cities in a row. There were only 21 cities in the Zhao country. Empress Dowager Zhuang's eyes were cold. Her phoenix robe fluttered in the evening wind. Pass my decree. Summon Gu Changqing back to the capital immediately. Reorganize the Gu army and go north to fight the enemy. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. The novel is more complete and updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found on the internet are all available here. https://www.zhpqg.com/8964-2_89622826/1097383331. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhpqg.com Bikuga mobile reading website. zhpqg.com. Chapter 479. The newest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more interesting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels that can't be found online are all here. The moon was dark and the wind was strong. Because of the successive battles, the capital had fallen into a tense and alert state. Yuan Tang had already been hiding in the capital for several days, like a rat crossing the street. He had lived for so many years, but he had never been in such a sorry state. When Gu Jiao told him that his royal uncle wanted to rebel, he didn't believe it. After all, his royal uncle was the previous emperor's most beloved son. Back then, when his royal father was still the crown prince of the Qin kingdom, he had committed a serious crime. It was his royal uncle who tried his best to redress his crimes and help his royal father keep his position as crown prince. How could people not trust King Bo's uncle like this? As for his maternal family, the Rong family, the daughter of the Rong family, who was his mother, was the imperial concubine of Qin. She was above one person and below tens of thousands of people. She was only waiting to be conferred the title of empress. King Bo's uncle and the Rong family were not related by marriage. Did water enter the Rong family's brain? They didn't help their own daughter and grandson, but helped an outsider? He felt that Gu Jiao must have made a mistake, or she was maliciously trying to sow discord between him and King Bo's uncle. But he still had a plan and ordered people to keep an eye on the movements of the Zhao country's royal family. It wasn't until the emperor ordered people to capture him that he realized the seriousness of the matter. He was the first to escape. A few days after he escaped, news came from the border that Qin country's army was pressing on the border, and Zhao country had lost 3 cities. It was also at that moment that he finally understood that Gu Jiao didn't lie to him. His uncle King Bo really rebelled. The emperor was still ordering people to capture him. He probably thought that by capturing him, he could threaten the Chun state. However, Gu Jiao was right. It was not his imperial father who wanted to violate the agreement between the two states. It was his imperial uncle, Prince Bo. So even if he was killed, his uncle wouldn't bat an eye. It was a dead end for him right now. He didn't know how his father was. Since Prince Bo's royal uncle dared to do such a thing, he must have taken control of the royal court and might have even put his royal father under house arrest. Thinking of this, Yuan Tang's face turned cold. Let's look over there. The voice of the Imperial Guard came from not far away. This kind of situation, where they could be exposed at any time, had happened countless times. Yuan Tang had gradually become numb from the initial indignation. However, he did not dare to let his guard down. Otherwise, once he was caught, his life would be gone. Imperial uncle would not protect him, and Zhao country would not let him go. He was someone that both sides wanted to kill as soon as possible. Yuan Tang passed through an alley at the side. As soon as he arrived at a main street, he was blocked by Lu Yisheng. Lu Yisheng hired a carriage. He lifted the curtain and said, "Follow me." However, Yuan Tang did not step forward. Instead, he looked at Lu Yisheng with a complicated expression. The sound of footsteps behind him gradually approached. Without looking back, he disappeared into the night. He couldn't implicate his cousin. Even if he died, he would die alone in Zhao country. On the other side, the news of losing 3 cities at the border and the old Marquis being captured reached Marquis Ding and Manor. What did you say? The old man was captured at the border. In the study, Marquis Gu looked at Huang Zhong in disbelief. Did you hear wrong? Didn't the old man go on a scenic tour? How did he end up at the border? That is a bitter and cold place. Huang Zhong was at his wits' end as he said, "It is absolutely true, Marquis. The remnants of the previous dynasty colluded with the Chun country's army at the border. They did not hesitate to sell out the country to help the Chun country advance to the border. The news of the old man being captured has already spread throughout the palace." How could it be like this? Marquis Gu fell into his chair in a daze. Huang Zhong said with worry, "The Empress Dowager is furious. She ordered the heir to return to the capital. She said she wants to reorganize the Gu family's army. She wants the heir to lead the Gu family's army north to fight against the enemy." Marquis Gu's expression changed again. Chang Qing is also going to the border? He was only 21 years old. He had never been to a battlefield so far away, nor had he experienced such a fierce battle. With 100,000 Gu family soldiers heading north, there would be a tough battle ahead. Outside the study, Gu Chengfeng, who had inadvertently overheard the conversation, felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He knew that his grandfather had secretly gone to the border under the emperor's orders, but he never expected that his grandfather would not only fail to save Princess Ning, but also lose his own life. He didn't know who the remnants of the previous dynasty were, but based on concubine Jing, he could roughly deduce that they were vicious and merciless. His grandfather's life would be in danger if he fell into their hands. His eldest brother was far away near Fengdu Mountain. It would take some time for him to return to the capital and reorganize the Gu family's army. If he were to head north to the border, he didn't know if his grandfather would live to see his eldest brother. His grandfather would not allow himself to be used as a bargaining chip to impede his eldest brother and the Gu family's army. If the remnants of the previous dynasty used him to threaten his eldest brother, his grandfather would rather die than submit. Gu Chengfeng returned to his own courtyard. He found his night clothes and put them on, then put on his mask and picked up a few hidden weapons he had bought from Thousand Secrets Pavilion. After doing all this, he went to the next room. At this time, Gu Chunlin had already rested. Gu Chengfeng came to the bedside and looked at Gu Chunlin, who was sleeping soundly. He tucked him in, touched his hair that had grown out a little, and stuffed the banknotes he had on him under his pillow. "In the future, you'll have to buy your own hair restorer." After saying this, he reluctantly took one last look at his younger brother. At this time, he was actually envious of Gu Yen and the newborn. At least those two had so many people to care for them, while Gu Chunlin only had him left. But now, even he had to leave. This time, he wasn't just going to do a simple mission. He was going to the border and infiltrate the enemy's camp. Whether he lived or died was unknown. If he didn't come back, if I don't come back, you'll have to take care of yourself in the future, understand? Gu Chunlin, who was sleeping soundly, didn't know that his brother had left. He turned over and slept peacefully and peacefully. In the end, Gu Chungfeng still left. He gently closed the door for his younger brother and went to the stable to secretly ride his father's Fergana horse. Jade Water Alley. The family had a busy day and went back to their rooms to rest. Gu Jiao went to the east room to check on the baby. The baby's jaundice had disappeared and the wrinkles on his face were gradually smoothed out. He was a fair and tender little cutie. Jiao Jiao. Little Jing Kong appeared behind her with a pillow in his arms. You're still awake? Gu Jiao turned to look at him. Yes, I miss you a little. Little Jing Kong said seriously. Gu Jiao smiled and patted his little head. I'll send you there. Okay. Little Jing Kong held his little pillow with one hand and held Gu Jiao's hand with the other. He skipped to the next room. He lay on the soft bed, opened his big round eyes, and said obediently, Jiao Jiao. Yes? I've covered myself with the quilt. Good boy. Gu Jiao touched his forehead. Go to sleep. Little Jing Kong closed his eyes obediently. After a while, he opened his eyes again. Jiao Jiao? I'm here. He closed his eyes again with peace of mind. He held Gu Jiao's hand with his little hand and didn't hide his dependence and need. Gu Jiao stayed with him until he fell asleep and began to snore evenly. Then she got up and went back to the backyard through the small passage. She went to Gu Yan and Gu Xiaoshuan's room. The two little boys had already fallen asleep. Gu Yan slept very well. Maybe because he was always bullied by his sister when he was in the womb. Gu Xiaoshuan didn't sleep well, and half of his legs were hanging out of the bed. Gu Jiao put Gu Xiaoshuan's legs under the quilt and touched their foreheads. Among the children, Gu Xiaoshuan was the most worry-free, and Gu Yan was the most worrisome. Gu Yan's heart disease had always been a problem that Gu Jiao wanted to solve. However, the small medicine box didn't meet the requirements for the operation. Gu Jiao opened the bedside table and put the anti-heart failure medicine in it. After doing this, she went back to the west room and found some clean clothes. She rummaged through the cabinet and showed a puzzled look. Are you looking for this? Xiao Heng's voice suddenly sounded at the door. Gu Jiao turned around and saw Xiao Heng walking towards her with a mask inlaid with peacock feathers. She blinked and said, It's from Jing Kong. Xiao Heng smiled helplessly and couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expose her. Instead, he opened the cabinet door and took out a bundle. There's dried meat and some dry food in here. In the past, she used to pack things for him. This time, it was his turn to send her away. You. Gu Jiao opened her mouth and looked at him. Aren't you leaving the capital? Xiao Heng asked as if nothing had happened. He took a few more things for her. Oh, she thought she hid it well. You plan to leave without saying goodbye? Gu Jiao shook her head like a rattledrum. I wrote you a letter. It's in your study. Xiao Heng's expression softened. He handed the bundle to her and stared at her deeply. Are you coming back? This question was somewhat thought-provoking. If she was the real Gu Jiao's mother, it was impossible for her not to come back. Gu Jiao always thought that Gu Chungfeng was the only one who believed that she wasn't the real Gu Jiao's mother. And the reason why Gu Chungfeng thought this was most likely because he thought that she killed the real Gu Jiao's mother and replaced her with another person. Xiao Heng, on the other hand, clearly understood that this body belonged to Gu Jianyang. Then why would he ask such a question? He seemed to see the doubt in Gu Jiao's eyes. He also seemed to feel that if he didn't say something today, he might not have the courage to say it in the future. He said, Since you fell into the water 2 years ago, you become very different. I know you're Gu Jiao's mother, but sometimes I feel that you're not Gu Jiao's mother. She really wasn't, but she really was. This was a very contradictory topic. Are you coming back? He asked her again. Gu Jiao paused and looked at him. regardless of whether I'm Gu Jiao's mother or not. Xiao Heng nodded seriously. Yes, regardless of whether you're Gu Jiao's mother or not. Of course. Gu Jiao rolled her eyes and swallowed the words at the tip of her tongue. She raised her eyebrows and said, I'm coming back. Do you want me to see you bathe? Xiao Heng never expected that she would be thinking about this at the moment of parting. He was stunned, but at the same time, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What kind of girl was this? He chuckled softly and walked a few steps closer to her. His strong arm gently hooked around her waist. It seemed domineering, but he was also restraining himself. He clearly didn't touch her, but Gu Jiao felt as if her waist was on fire. This fire burned all the way to the bottom of her heart and made her little head dizzy. This feeling was very strange. Oh, I want to do something. It's so strange. Xiao Heng stared at her and took in her dazed and drooling little face. He tugged at the corner of his lips and said to her in a somewhat bewitching and hoarse voice, Okay, come back and I'll let you see. Remember, I'll come back safely. If I lose a strand of hair, I'll wear an extra layer of clothes. Digression. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more fully. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhpqg.com/89642_89642/1097140028. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhpqg.com Biku Mobile Reading Website. zhpqg.com. Chapter 480. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. Gu Jiao was silent for a few seconds. Without saying anything, she opened the cabinet and took out the soft armor that old he gave her from the underground martial arts arena. She didn't want to wear it because it was ugly. After that, Gu Jiao found all kinds of sharp weapons at home. There were 2 daggers at her waist, 2 lancets hidden in her narrow sleeves, a few silver needles in her hair bun, a few blades hidden in the soles of her shoes, and even a small hidden weapon under her tongue. Xiao Heng. That's not necessary. Gu Jiao set off fully armed. Her red tasseled spear was a little eye-catching, so Xiao Heng wrapped it with a cloth. Xiao Heng watched her leave Jade Water Alley and disappear into the boundless night. He stood in place, lost in thought for a long time. It was late at night, and the lights of the thousands of houses were gradually extinguished. The capital fell into the silence of the night. However, the Imperial Guards patrolling the streets and alleys didn't stop for a moment. They moved lightly, trying not to disturb the people along the way. Gu Chengfeng arrived at the North Gate under the watchful eyes of the Imperial Guards. The city gate had long been closed, but as the legitimate son of the Gu family, he knew that there was a secret passage near the North Gate. Under normal circumstances, 2 to 4 guards would take turns to guard it. Because it was hidden, not many people knew about it. Therefore, the guards on duty weren't too powerful. Gu Chengfeng could easily break through by himself, but he had a horse in his hand. Gu Chengfeng looked at the horse behind him, and the horse looked back at him. The man and the horse stared at each other. For a moment, Gu Chengfeng even regretted stealing his father's horse. Although the horse was good, it was difficult to get it out. Forget it. Since he had already come this far, it would be a pity to abandon the horse. Moreover, a horse of such quality couldn't be bought at the courier station. Breakout. A large group of Imperial Guards was nearby. In the end, Gu Chengfeng could only close his eyes and grit his teeth helplessly. I'm sorry, father. I can only trick you. 15 minutes later, Gu Chengfeng put on his bamboo hat and rode on Marquis Gu's Fergana horse. He held Marquis Gu's personal token and appeared outside the secret passage. When the guard on duty saw the token, he looked at the man on the horse with a strange expression and asked, "You are?" Gu Chengfeng lowered his voice and imitated his father's voice. "You don't even recognize me. His Majesty has ordered this Marquis to leave the capital at night. This Marquis has official business to attend to. So why don't you let this Marquis go with you? How many heads do you have to chop off for delaying His Majesty's important matters?" "I wouldn't dare." After the leader of the guards finished speaking, he hurriedly signaled his subordinates to make way, and he himself also stood respectfully to the side. In reality, they had never seen Marquis Gu and could not tell if Marquis Gu's voice was real or fake. However, the token that Gu Chengfeng showed was real. In addition, Marquis Ding and Fu was the emperor's trusted aide. In addition, the court had one incident after another, not to mention the Empress Dowager's order for Gu Chongqing to reorganize the Gu family's army. With everything put together, no one suspected that there would be someone pretending to be Marquis Gu to pass on the emperor's orders. This was a capital crime punishable by beheading. Gu Chengfeng estimated that his father would be brought to the emperor for questioning the next day. However, since the court placed his eldest brother and the Gu family's army in an important position, then they would not take his father's life. At most, they would punish his father for not teaching his son well. For example, they would give him 100 paddles or something. Marquis Gu was sleeping when he suddenly shivered. He did not know what had happened after Gu Chengfeng left the city. He galloped all the way to the north. Fearing that the guards would realize what had happened, he galloped until the horse was panting heavily. Only then did he stop. He turned back to look. They shouldn't have caught up, right? Don't worry, they didn't catch up. A small, careless voice sounded from behind the trees. Gu Chengfeng shuddered and almost fell off the horse's back. In the middle of the night, there was a voice from behind the tree. Was it a person or a ghost? Wait, that voice was a bit familiar. Gu Chengfeng composed himself and turned his head to look in the direction of the tree. Earlier, he had not looked carefully because he was in a hurry. Now, using the thin moonlight, he saw a horse tied to a tall Chinese parasol tree. Beside the horse stood a young man in green clothes. The young man crossed his arms and leaned against the tree behind him. After saying that, the young man walked out from the shadow of the tree. Gu Chengfeng saw her face clearly. "It's really you?" He was shocked. Gu Jiao's finger pointed at the arm around her. She tilted her head and said, "Are you very surprised?" How can I not be surprised? What are you doing here in the middle of the night instead of sleeping? You've already left the capital. No, it was at least 20 to 30 li away from the capital. Gu Chengfeng looked at her suspiciously. "You're not going to make me run errands for you again, are you? I'm warning you. This time I won't go with you no matter what. I have something important to do. Something very, very important." A human life was at stake. "Oh." Gu Jiao made a sound and let go of her arms. She straightened her body and touched the tall and strong horse. She nimbly flipped onto the horse. Only then did Gu Chengfeng realize that she was also riding a top-notch horse, which was not inferior to his father's mount in the slightest. "Didn't you say you were going to leave?" Gu Jiao looked at him strangely. Gu Chengfeng was too surprised and did not understand the meaning of this sentence. He stared straight at her horse. "Didn't you not know how to ride a horse?" "I'm not good at it." Gu Jiao corrected him. "But I should be good at it in the future." After all, it was 1,000 li from here to the frontier fortress. It was enough for her to practice. Gu Chengfeng still did not understand what she meant. His gaze moved away from her horse and fell on her back. The small basket she always carried was hanging on the saddle. It was replaced by a large thing wrapped in cloth. Even though it was wrapped in cloth, Gu Chengfeng could still faintly feel a strong aura. "What are you carrying on your back?" he asked curiously. "A red tasseled spear." Gu Jiao said. "What red tasseled spear is so big?" The suspicion in Gu Chengfeng's eyes grew heavier. "Also, why are you carrying this thing on your back in the middle of the night?" Gu Jiao looked at him indifferently. Are you still going or not? Of course I'm going. Before Gu Chengfeng could finish speaking, Gu Jiao urged her horse forward. Gu Chengfeng looked in the direction she was going and reminded her, "Hey, are you going the wrong way? That's not the way to the capital." Gu Jiao said indifferently, "Who said I'm going back to the capital?" Gu Chengfeng sneered. "If you're not going back to the capital, are you going to the frontier fortress with me?" As soon as he finished speaking, his eyes suddenly widened. He urged his horse to Gu Jiao's side and looked at her cold face. You can't be noisy." Gu Jiao directly took out a cornbread from her bag and stuffed it into his mouth. Gu Chengfeng's mouth was stuffed. He whimpered a few times and took the cornbread down. He urged his horse to ride side by side with her. "Wait, tell me clearly. Are you really going to the frontier fortress? What are you going to do there? Don't you know that there's a war at the frontier fortress? The Chun Kingdom's army has already taken over 3 cities at the frontier fortress. It's not a good place to go sightseeing." Gu Jiao pulled the reins. "Yes." Gu Chengfeng frowned. This girl didn't seem to have that much free time. "Hey, don't tell me you want to go to the frontier fortress because you heard that something happened to your grandfather?" Gu Chengfeng muttered. "You're not the real Gu Jiao's mother. You don't need to care about my grandfather's matters. The frontier fortress was too dangerous." Princess Ning had 3 dragon shadow guards by her side, but they were still captured by the remnants of the previous dynasty. It was clear how difficult it was to deal with those people. This wasn't a muddy water she should wade into. Gu Chengfeng looked at her seriously. "Tell me the truth. Are you going to the frontier fortress or not? And why are you going to the frontier fortress?" Being able to ask the second question meant that Gu Chengfeng already had an answer to the first question in his heart. "To save someone," Gu Jiao said. "Who are you saving?" Gu Chengfeng asked. "A brother." Gu Jiao paused. "And a fool." "Brother?" Then it didn't seem to be his grandfather. Gu Chengfeng wasn't in a hurry to ask who her brother was, nor did he ask who the fool was. In short, it couldn't be him. Gu Chengfeng said again, "Speaking of which, how did you get out of the city?" Gu Jiao made an O sound and said, "I rode out on a horse." Gu Chengfeng opened his mouth. "From the north gate?" Gu Jiao said, "Or are there other gates?" Gu Chengfeng frowned. "Isn't the city gate already closed? Did you come out very early?" Gu Jiao shook her head. "No, just a little earlier than you. I have an imperial edict." Gu Chengfeng was flabbergasted. Why do you have an imperial edict? Are you going north by imperial edict?" If this girl had an imperial edict, then why did he have to risk the crime of deceiving the emperor to come out of the secret passage? Gu Jiao shook her head again. "I asked His Majesty for it. I said I wanted to go out, and His Majesty gave it to me. He also gave me a horse." Gu Chengfeng, who had suffered a blow, "I suddenly don't want to talk to you anymore. Digression, Versailles, we are serious. Also, I'm only 10 votes away from reaching 3,000. Will I be able to reach 3,000 before the end of the year?" The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhpqg.com/89642_8964226/1097122264. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhpqg.com Biku mobile reading website. zhpqg.com. Chapter 481. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more frequently. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng set off on their journey to the north. Yuan Tang, who was trapped in the capital, was not so lucky. He could not get the imperial edict from the emperor of Zhao country, nor could he use the secret passage at the north gate. He tried several times to sneak out of the city with the caravan, but he always failed. As the battle at the frontier fortress escalated, more and more bad news came back to the court. The emperor's anger towards Yuan Tang became more and more intense. Since a few days ago, even the palace masters were ordered by the emperor to capture Yuan Tang. Yuan Tang encountered 3 waves of palace masters last night, causing him to lose contact with his subordinates. When the sun was about to rise, he finally fought his way out of the encirclement, but he also paid a terrible price. His right arm was cut. If he encountered another palace master, he could not guarantee that he would be lucky enough to escape. He's injured and can't go far. You guys, go over there. The rest of you, follow me. Yuan Tang tightly covered his right arm and hid in a family stable. Listening to the palace masters outside the walls, he could not help but show some irritation and despair. He was the 6th prince of Qin country. The empress had passed away. His mother had the highest position in the harem. His mother was the vice-empress. His maternal family was the Rong family, which held military power. He was the most honorable prince of Qin country. Since his birth, he had almost never suffered. Even when he came to Zhao country as a hostage, he only wanted to gain some merit and become the crown prince. Thanks to his royal uncle, Prince Bo, he was able to pay back all the sufferings he had suffered in the past 20 years. His wound hurt again. Yuan Tang frowned. Just at this moment, the servants of the house came. In the stable, they suddenly saw an unfamiliar man in a sorry state with blood dripping from his arm. The servant instinctively screamed. Yuan Tang knocked him out with a karate chop. However, the voice still traveled out and the imperial guards rushed to the stables. Yuan Tang had no choice but to leave and find another hiding place. There were imperial guards in front and behind him, and the right side was a dead end. There was only a carriage parked on the left side. Yuan Tang had no choice but to hide in it. The carriage didn't look big, but it was quite spacious inside. It was also a little tasteful. The bench was covered with a cloth. He lifted the cloth and tucked his tall body under the bench. In such a narrow space, a big guy like him was really wronged. Sir Xiao, please take care. In the study room next to the carriage, the boss personally sent Xiao Heng out. Please wait a moment. Xiao Heng nodded. After speaking to the boss, he turned around and boarded the carriage that was parked at the side of the road. The coachman came out of the study room with a large pile of the 4 treasures of the study. Xiao Heng had just received a transfer order from the Ministry of Personnel this morning, appointing him as a secondary grade 5 scribe of the Ministry of Justice. Clerks were mainly responsible for organizing files, managing official seals, and drafting documents. His official position in the Hanlin Academy didn't change. He only held the position of a scribe at the same time. This was the idea of the Minister of Justice. He had submitted it to the Ministry of Personnel last month. The positions of the 6 ministries were different from those of the Hanlin Academy. They weren't under the jurisdiction of the cabinet. After receiving the document from the Minister of Justice, the Ministry of Personnel first reviewed it internally and then submitted it to the emperor for him to review. It was very rare for an official to hold multiple positions, especially across departments. The requirements for the official themselves were very high. Whether it was strength, energy, or accomplishment, they must be much better than their colleagues. The emperor was worried that Xiao Liulong's body couldn't take it. Secondly, he was worried that he would be ostracized if he was too popular. The emperor called the old chancellor into the palace and asked for his opinion. The old chancellor didn't think of this at first. Now that someone had taken the lead, he couldn't wait to send Xiao Heng to a high position. Now that we are in need of people, Your Majesty might as well let Xiao Lulang try first. If he can't take care of both, then we can make other plans. The emperor felt that the old chancellor's words were reasonable, so he approved Xiao Liulong's official position. Xiao Heng had just reported to the Ministry of Justice and was about to return to the Hanlin Academy. When he passed by this study room, he remembered that he didn't have much ink and brushes at home, so he stopped the carriage to buy some. As soon as he entered the carriage, he felt that something was wrong. The curtain of the carriage was open. The carriage was very ventilated, but he still smelled a faint smell of blood. "Lord Xiao, I'll put the things here." The coachman put a big box of 4 treasures of the study on the floor of the carriage. He wasn't as sensitive as Xiao Hung and didn't find anything strange. "Are we returning to the Hanlin Academy now? Do you want to buy something else?" "No need," Xiao Hung said. "Okay, then I'll go out." The coachman put down the curtain and sat back on the bench outside. Xiao Hung wasn't in a hurry to sit down. Instead, he vigilantly looked at the bench covered with brocade cloth. Under the bench, Yuan Tang clenched his wound. Sweat seeped out of his forehead because of the tension and pain. He didn't know whose carriage this was, but he heard the coachman call him Lord Xiao and ask him if he wanted to go to the Hanlin Academy. There was only one official with the surname Xiao in the Hanlin Academy, and that was Dr. Gu's husband, Xiao Lulang. Yuan Tang and Xiao Lulang had never officially met face to face. They had only seen each other a few times from afar. He knew that Xiao Lulang was Dr. Gu's husband, this year's top scholar, and was now working in the Hanlin Academy. As for whether Xiao Hung knew him, Yuan Tang wasn't sure. But if he really saw his current appearance, even if Xiao Lulang didn't know him, he should be able to guess who he was. Whether Xiao Lulang was a friend or a foe, Yuan Tang didn't dare to easily come to a conclusion. Although he was Gu Jiao's husband, he and Shi Yi were officials of the imperial court. If they were officials of the imperial court, then they had to arrest him and bring him to justice. Yuan Tang bit down hard on his lips to prevent himself from making a sound. He had no intention of harming Gu Jiao's family, but if he really wanted to arrest him, then he would have no choice but to offend him. Whose carriage is that in front? A group of imperial guards stopped in front of the carriage. The one who asked this question was the commander of the group. They had chased them all the way and surrounded them, but that brat Yuan Tang seemed to have disappeared without a trace. They guessed that Yuan Tang must be hiding right under their noses. If he wasn't in a nearby shop, then he must be in a passing carriage. Xiao Hung looked at the blood slowly flowing out from under the bench. His eyes moved slightly. He turned around and walked forward. He lifted up his clothes and sat down. His right foot just happened to step on the flowing blood. The coachman and the imperial guards talked for a while. Then he lifted the curtain slightly and said to Xiao Hung, "Lord Xiao, the imperial guards said that they were trying to capture a hostage from the Chun Empire. They hope that you can search our carriage." Xiao Hung raised his hand and gestured for the coachman to lift the curtain. The coachman bowed and lifted the curtain as far as it could, allowing the imperial guards to clearly see the situation inside the carriage. Xiao Hung sat upright in the carriage with a serious expression. His appearance was young and handsome, but his aura was exceptionally strong. His eyes revealed an imposing manner without being angry. "Do you need to come up and search carefully?" The commander was stunned by Xiao Liulang's appearance and aura. He was stunned for a while before coming back to his senses. He probably realized that he had lost his composure. He hurriedly lowered his head and cupped his hands in salute. "There's no need. We have already seen clearly. We hope that Lord Xiao will forgive us for disturbing you." Xiao Hung was someone who was highly regarded by both the emperor and the empress dowager. Even if the commander had 8 times the courage, he wouldn't dare to offend him easily. Moreover, it was quite rude of him to stare at him like that. "It's fine," Xiao Hung said. The commander said politely, "Then we will continue to search. Lord Xiao, farewell." Xiao Hung nodded. "Farewell." The commander planned to take the rest of the imperial guards to search the nearby shops. Just as he turned around, he heard the sound of something dripping on the ground. The sound was very soft, but there weren't many people on the street at the moment. The surroundings were very quiet. Yuan Tang's expression suddenly changed. His blood was dripping down the cracks in the floorboards. This was the end. He was going to be discovered. "What are you standing there for?" Xiao Hung snapped at the coachman. "How much longer are you going to make me bleed?" Hurry up and go to the medical center. The coachman was stunned. Was His Excellency injured? When? Xiao Heng's aura was too strong. The coachman didn't have the courage to ask him what was wrong. He hurriedly lowered the curtain and said, "Yes. Yes. We will go to the medical center now." The moment before the curtain was lowered, the commander saw that there was blood seeping out of Xiao Yulong's right foot. So His Excellency was really injured? The commander frowned. He was a little suspicious, but he was still afraid of Xiao Liulang's status. Sure, he also didn't think Xiao Lulang would lie. In the end, he didn't go to check. The coachman drove the carriage to the nearest medical center. Suddenly, he heard His Excellency say, "Don't go to the medical center. Go to the north gate." Ah! The coachman was startled again. "His Excellency Xiao, aren't you injured? We're almost at the medical center. I just remembered that the carriage has some medicine for wounds. I'll just apply some ointment myself." Then, okay. The coachman was confused. He didn't understand how His Excellency's temper changed so quickly. "His Excellency wants to go to the north gate?" Xiao Heng's tone was normal. "I originally planned to go in the afternoon, but after thinking about it, I think it's better to go now." Okay. The coachman's status was low, so he didn't dare ask about Xiao Heng's official business. He drove the carriage to the north gate. Xiao Heng flashed the Ministry of Justice's token. "Investigate the case." The city guards let them go. Xiao Heng went to the nearest courier station outside the north gate. "Feed the horses some food," he ordered the coachman. Yes. The coachman unloaded the reins and shaft of the carriage, then took the horses to the courier station stable. Xiao Heng got out of the carriage with an indifferent expression. He sat in the courier station for a quarter of an hour before returning to the carriage. At this time, the smell of yuan tang had disappeared from the carriage. The coachman walked over with the horses that had eaten their fill. "His Excellency," Xiao Heng said indifferently, "return to the capital." The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found on the internet can be found here. https://www.zhpqg.com/8964-2_89642_109690584. HTML Genius. Memorize the website's address in 1 second. www.zhpqg.com Biku Go mobile reading website. zhpqg.com. Chapter 482. This book's newest chapter is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that cannot be found online are all available here. For Xiao Heng, today was a joyous day for his promotion. For the Yuan Tang, who had finally escaped from the capital, it was also a day worthy of celebration. The capital's Marquis, Gu, was not so lucky. First, he felt a chill run down his spine in the middle of the night, feeling that something big was about to happen. As expected, he was caught in the early morning before he even woke up. He was completely dumbfounded. What was this situation? Why was he caught for no reason? His father was caught at the border, and he was caught in the capital. What kind of trouble was this? Marquis Gu. The one who caught him was none other than Xiao Heng's new superior, Xing Shangshu. Xing Shangshu sternly said, "You are suspected of deceiving the ruler. This official needs you to make a trip to the Ministry of Justice." Marquis Gu was dumbfounded. "Wait, speak clearly. Who deceives the ruler?" Xing Shangshu had already expected him to say this. He brought in the guards who had been on duty last night and asked the leader, "What happened last night while you were on duty? Speak in detail." The leader of the guard said, "Last night, Marquis Gu made a fake imperial edict and left the capital through the secret passage at the north gate." Marquis Gu angrily said, This marquis stayed in the manor the entire night. When did I leave the city? When did I make a fake imperial edict? Xing Shangshu looked at the guard. Are you sure you didn't see wrong? In front of Marquis Gu? The guard sternly said, that person was holding Marquis Ding's token. His voice was also the same as Marquis Gu's. Marquis Gu's eyes turned cold. Don't slander me. What did he look like? Xing Shangshu asked. The guard was intimidated by Marquis Gu's aura. He looked at Xing Shangshu and said, he was wearing a bamboo hat. This one did not see clearly. Marquis Gu's anger had nowhere to vent. Go to the manor and investigate. This marquis did not leave the manor. There must be someone pretending to be this marquis. That token is also fake. This marquis token is clearly. Marquis Gu said and reached for the token in his wide sleeve, but unexpectedly, he touched nothing. Where's his token? Marquis. Not good. Second young master is missing. It was Huang Zhong's voice. Gu Chengfeng was gone. Marquis Gu's token was also missing. If Marquis Gu still couldn't figure out what had happened, it wouldn't make sense. Marquis, your horse is gone too. Marquis Gu clenched his fist so tightly that his knuckles cracked. Unfilial son. This unfilial son. Why didn't he realize that his second brother was so daring before? Without a word, he stole his horse and token and left the capital with a fake imperial edict. Why did he leave the capital? Heavens! After Minister Xing's careful questioning, it was confirmed that the height and figure of the Marquis Gu from last night basically matched Gu Qingfeng's. The characteristics of the horse also all matched Marquis Gu's horse. It was Gu Chengfeng who confirmed it. Even though it wasn't Marquis Gu who had deceived the emperor, his son had deceived the emperor. As his father, he wasn't clean either. The Minister of Justice reported the results of his investigation to the emperor. Just as Gu Chengfeng had expected, his father was severely punished by the emperor with 100 strikes. The son had to pay for the father's debts, and the father had to pay for the son's debts. The emperor showed no mercy. Marquis Gu suffered an unexpected calamity and was beaten until he cried out in pain. It was a tragic sight. Huang Zhong had already calmed down. He didn't know when it started, but his marquis was already on the path of being beaten, never to return. He once again skillfully carried him onto the carriage. The frontier fortress was thousands of li away. Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng hurried on without stopping. In order to get to the frontier fortress as quickly as possible, they changed horses at almost every relay station. The two of them traveled even at night. Even so, affected by the weather and the roads, it still took them nearly 20 days to reach the frontier fortress. At the end of October, cold winds howled and thousands of li were sealed in ice. Beiyang City, Lingguan City, and Yi City had all fallen. Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng were currently in Yuegu City. If nothing unexpected happened, Yuegu City would be the next target of the Chun army and the remnants of the previous dynasty. Perhaps because of the impending war, Yuegu City was in a state of panic. There were very few people on the streets, and many shops were closed. Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng wore thick fox fur coats and led their horses through the somewhat empty streets. They had long discovered that the further north they went, the more desolate the city became. Many people had even abandoned their hometowns and fled south with their families. A 7- or 8-year-old girl was being led by her family in a hurry. However, she accidentally fell and coincidentally fell at Gu Jiao's feet. Gu Jiao reached out and helped the girl up. The girl's family didn't even have time to thank her before they led the child away in panic. They were worried that if they stayed any longer, the city gates would close and they wouldn't be able to leave tonight. Yuegu City was going to war. Although they didn't know when it would be, it was always right to leave early. Hey, you dropped something. Gu Chengfeng picked up an old rattledrum on the ground. The girl turned around and looked at the rattledrum. Her eyes were filled with longing and reluctance. However, her family pulled her away without looking back. Really, Gu Chengfeng wanted to say something, but stopped. It was useless for him to take the rattle drum. Since they didn't want it, he could only throw it away. The situation in Uegu City was worse than he had imagined. He sighed. It's already like this before the war. I don't know what it will be like when the war starts. Gu Jiao knew that in her dream, blood flowed like a river. Starving people were everywhere. Mountains and rivers were broken. The people were displaced. The strong men were killed. The women and children were bullied. And the frontier fortress became a living hell. Are you staying at an inn or a relay station tonight? Gu Chengfeng asked. Neither. Gu Jiao said. Then where are you staying? You can't stay on the streets. Gu Chengfeng looked at the dark sky. I think the weather isn't right. There might be a big snowstorm at night. If you really sleep on the streets, you'll freeze to death. Gu Jiao didn't plan to sleep on the streets. She stopped and stood on the snowy street. She felt as if she had been here before. Clearly, this street didn't appear in her dream. She pondered for a moment, then led the horse to the right. Hey, where are you going? Gu Chengfeng asked. The governor's residence. Gu Jiao said. Why are you going there? Gu Chengfeng asked, puzzled. Stay. Gu Jiao said, her words as precious as gold. Gu Chengfeng frowned. To the governor's residence? Why do you want to live there? Gu Jiao led the horse forward. It's free. Gu Chengfeng was speechless. Gu Chengfeng didn't ask how Gu Jiao knew where the governor's residence was. Along the way, she was like a walking map. She knew everything. But thinking that there was something called a map in this world, Gu Chengfeng understood. The two arrived at the governor's residence. There weren't many patrolling guards on the streets, but the governor's residence was heavily guarded. Who are you? A guard walked towards Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng. Gu Jiao didn't say anything. She just threw a token to him. The guard was just a small soldier at the border. He didn't know anything about the capital, but Gu Jiao's aura was imposing. In addition, she and Gu Chengfeng were both wearing high-quality fox fur coats. One look, and he could tell that they weren't ordinary people. The guard took the token and entered the governor's residence. About half an hour later, a middle-aged man wearing an official's robe ran over. He held his official's hat and lifted the hem of his robe. Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng were both dressed as men. They wore masks on their faces. The middle-aged man looked at the two with a strange expression. He suppressed the doubts in his heart and bowed. This one's surname is Hu, and my name is Hu Hai. I'm the advisor of the governor's residence. The governor went out on business and didn't know that the two of you had arrived. Please forgive me for not coming out to meet you. Gu Chengfeng waited for Gu Jiao to speak. Gu Jiao didn't. Gu Chengfeng remembered that this girl didn't know how to pronounce fake sounds. He cleared his throat and said, It's fine. How should I address the two of you? Advisor, Hu asked respectfully. Gu Chengfeng put on the airs of an official and said, It's inconvenient for us to reveal our identities. Don't ask. Ah yes. Advisor, Hu returned the token to Gu Chengfeng. Gu Chengfeng thought for a moment and accepted it for Gu Jiao. Advisor, Hu invited the two into the governor's residence. Gu Chengfeng said in an accent, Find a quiet courtyard. We might have to stay in Uegu City for a few days. Yes. Yes. I'll arrange it right away. Advisor, Hu hurriedly responded and led the two to a clean courtyard. There were 3 rooms in the courtyard. Gu Chengfeng let Gu Jiao stay in the innermost room, and he stayed in the room next door. I'll go and pick a few clever servants, Advisor, Hu said with a smile. Gu Chengfeng glanced at Gu Jiao and saw that she had no intention of refusing. He nodded to Advisor, Hu, and said, Thank you for your trouble. Advisor, Hu respectfully withdrew from the courtyard. The steward curiously followed and said, Advisor, who are those 2 people? Why are you so polite to them? You even let them stay in Liuxiang courtyard. That courtyard was originally. Halfway through, he was interrupted by Advisor, who whispered, What do you know? They have Empress Dowager Zhuang's token in their hands. They're from the capital. The steward was dumbfounded. Gu Jiao did not care what kind of uproar her identity had caused in the governor's office. She entered the room, took off her mask, took off her red-tasseled spear and small basket, and put them down. It was freezing outside, but the room was very warm because of the heated Kong bed. Gu Chengfeng walked in and took off his mask while saying to her, "Strange, haven't you been hiding your identity well all this time? Why didn't you hide here?" Gu Jiao took off her deerskin gloves and said, "There's no need to hide. Our whereabouts have been exposed." Gu Chengfeng's eyes widened. "When were we exposed? Why didn't I know?" Gu Jiao said, "We were exposed when we entered Yuegu City." In the dream, Gu Chengfeng was targeted in Yuegu City. If nothing unexpected happened, someone would come tonight to drug Gu Chengfeng. Digression. Farewell to the old and welcome the new. Happy New Year's Eve. I seem to be serializing every New Year's Eve and writing every New Year's Eve. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/8964-2_89642826/1096888752. HTML Genius remembered the website address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Biku Go mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 483. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that cannot be found online are available here. Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng entered the governor's residence in the afternoon, but the governor did not return until evening. Advisor who asked the kitchen to prepare dinner, and he personally brought it over. Since Gu Chengfeng was with Gu Jiao, advisor who also brought the food to this room. At this moment, Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng both took off their masks. When he saw Gu Chengfeng, advisor who only thought that this official was born with good looks, but he was too young. Why would Empress Dowager Zhuang send such a young man to the frontier fortress? Then he saw Gu Jiao at the side. Advisor who was stunned by the birthmark on Gu Jiao's face. Was the imperial court so careless with its personnel? Gu Chengfeng took in all of advisor whose reactions. He didn't care when advisor who was sizing him up, but when advisor who stared at Gu Jiao with such a strange gaze, it made him angry for no reason. His expression turned cold. Is there anything else, advisor who? No. Teacher who came back to his senses in an instant and sensed the displeasure of the other party. He smiled sheepishly and took 2 steps forward with the tray. My lords, this is your dinner. I'll put it here for you. As he spoke, he respectfully placed the tray on the table in front of the two of them. Along the way, Gu Chengfeng and Gu Jiao had spent many nights in the open. They had been to rich cities and barren towns. The further north they went, the colder the weather was, and the harder the life of the people seemed to be. But he did not expect that the food in the governor's residence would be so bad. After all, he was the highest-ranking official in the region. Gu Chengfeng looked at the wretched-looking cornbread, 2 boiled eggs, and a plate of pickled vegetables in the bowl. He was dumbfounded. As if sensing Gu Chengfeng's confusion, advisor who smiled awkwardly and said, "The frontier fortress is a bitter and cold place. It cannot be compared to the capital. I hope my lords will forgive us. Even the governor's residence is so poor?" Gu Chengfeng could not help but ask. Wasn't there a saying among the common people that 3 years of being an honest magistrate is worth 100,000 snowflakes of silver? There were only poor commoners in the world. How could there be poor officials? Advisor who lowered his head and sighed helplessly. Sirs, you may not know this, but Yuegu City is poor and the people don't have enough to eat. The prefect was born in a poor family and loves the people as if they were his own children. His salary has been used to provide relief to the victims of the disaster. He usually eats whatever the people eat. Today, in order to entertain the two sirs, he dug out the eggs and pickles that he is only willing to eat during the new year. There's meat in the pickles. The last sentence was the finishing touch. Gu Qingfeng's mouth twitched. There was meat inside? The kind with diced meat? Thinking of something, Gu Qingfeng asked. The imperial court allocates funds to the frontier fortress every year. Where does it go? Advisor, who sighed again. Our ancient moon city is just a small city. We don't get much money, and all of it has been used up. The governor doesn't take a single cent from the commoners, nor does he take a single cent from the imperial court. Gu Qingfeng was silent. Forget it. He was a bandit. Why should he care about the commoners? The purpose of his trip was to save his grandfather. Everything else had nothing to do with him. Advisor, who observed the situation and said, Sirs, please enjoy your meal. I'll take my leave. Gu Qingfeng waved his hand lightly. After Advisor, who left, Gu Qingfeng picked up a cornbread. It was probably hot when he took it out of the pot, but it was already cold by the time he brought it over. It was as stiff as a rock. Gu Qingfeng took a bite. It tasted so bad that he frowned. He said to Gu Jiao, if Princess Ning knew that she would marry into such a place, she probably wouldn't have come to the frontier fortress, right? I don't know, Gu Jiao said. Gu Qingfeng pursed his lips in disdain. She always had a way to end the conversation. He looked disdainful, but he was very careful when he picked out the cornbread for Gu Jiao. He peeled off the dried outer skin and put it in his bowl. The warm and soft core was placed in Gu Jiao's bowl. He also carefully picked out the pickled vegetables for a long time before picking out the diced meat and giving it to Gu Jiao. He wasn't so natural in the beginning. The first time was at the first relay station after leaving the capital. At that time, the food wasn't bad. They actually ate a plate of prawns. He was used to taking care of his younger brother, so he peeled one for Gu Jiao. When he put it on Gu Jiao's plate, he felt that something was wrong. Gu Jiao wasn't his younger brother or sister. He wouldn't admit it. The most awkward thing wasn't that he peeled the prawns for Gu Jiao, but that if Gu Jiao suddenly asked, "Why are you so nice to me?" Unexpectedly, Gu Jiao didn't say a word. She didn't even lift her eyelids, as if this action wasn't out of line and didn't matter. This made Gu Qingfeng secretly sigh in relief. After that, he unconsciously did something similar a few times. She always accepted it calmly. If he didn't do it, she wouldn't ask him why. Gu Qingfeng felt that this girl wasn't very difficult to get along with. Or more accurately, she was very easy to get along with. Even Gu Jinyu in the residence wasn't so easy to get along with. Gu Jinyu was too fragile and needed someone to protect her at all times. Otherwise, she would be sad and cry. Gu Jiao wasn't like that. She only knew how to make others cry. After dinner, Gu Qingfeng said to Gu Jiao, "I'm going to Yi City tomorrow to save grandfather. What are your plans?" The remnants of the previous dynasty were stationed in Yi City. His grandfather and Princess Ning had also been captured there. Yi City was the most heavily guarded of the three cities. Not only were there remnants of the previous dynasty, but also the Chun Kingdom's army. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. If he wanted to use his own strength to save his grandfather, the chances of success were slim. But he had to do this. That was his grandfather. Even if Yi City was a mountain of daggers and a sea of flames, he had to charge in. Gu Qingfeng suddenly remembered why Gu Jiao had come to the fortress. He asked her, "You said that your brother was also captured. Is he also in Yi City?" "No," Gu Jiao said. Gu Qingfeng's expression relaxed. "It's good that he's not in Yi City. Yi City's situation is the most complicated. Don't act on your own for now. Wait until I go to Yi City to save grandfather. Then I'll go with you to save your brother." Gu Jiao took a sip of water with sand in it and said slowly, "Okay, Princess Ning." And then the old duke had been secretly moved away long ago. Right now, they weren't in Yi City at all. Yi City was an empty nest that Gu Qingfeng couldn't return from. After Gu Qingfeng returned to his room, Gu Jiao also went to sleep. In the middle of the night, she heard a very slight movement on the roof. Her ears twitched and she opened her eyes coldly. In that dream, Gu Chengfeng was staying at an inn. On the first night, he was drugged. The next day, when he went to Yi City to save someone, he suddenly lost all his strength and fell into the enemy's trap. It seemed that the governor's manor's defenses weren't very effective. What should come still came. There were 3 people in total. Gu Jiao looked at the roof. She lifted the blanket and sat up. She heard them go next door. She waited for them to come out so that they could come to her side and die. But they just left. Wait. She came with Gu Chengfeng. Didn't they drug her as well? Or did they only want to deal with Gu Chengfeng from the beginning? No. Gu Chengfeng and the old marquis had their heads cut off, Gu Chongqing's legs were cut off, and the Gu family army was annihilated. This was not targeted at Gu Chengfeng, but at the Gu family and the Gu family army. She hid her identity and didn't reveal the fact that she was the Gu family's daughter. Thus, the enemy didn't count her in. Gu Jiao's eyes turned cold. She pushed open the door and went to Gu Chengfeng's room. She kicked the door open and walked in to extinguish the sleeping incense on the windowsill. Gu Chengfeng was awakened by the loud noise. He sat up with a dagger in his hand. Who is it? He looked at Gu Jiao and frowned. It's you. Let's go. Gu Jiao said calmly. What for? Gu Chengfeng asked. Gu Jiao threw the extinguished sleeping incense out of the windowsill. Didn't you want to save someone? Gu Chengfeng followed her movements and looked. What did you just throw away? Gu Jiao took out a handkerchief and wiped her hands. Sleeping incense. Gu Chengfeng frowned. You gave me sleeping incense? Gu Jiao said calmly. Yes, I want to kill you. Gu Chengfeng's face darkened. Of course, he didn't believe that Gu Jiao would kill him. Therefore, the sleeping incense wasn't given by Gu Jiao. He looked at Gu Jiao and then at the door that she kicked open. His face darkened. Did someone come here just now? You're not too stupid. Gu Jiao kept the handkerchief and said. Gu Chengfeng's expression turned serious. He was Fei Shuang. Only he knew how alert he was. Gu Jiao said that they were targeted when they entered the city. At that time, he only thought that the other party was far away and he couldn't find them in time. However, tonight, the other party was right under his nose and he didn't even notice. Gu Jiao walked out. If we don't leave now, we won't be able to catch up. At this point, it would be a bit pretentious to tell Gu Jiao that she didn't need to take the risk with him. Gu Chengfeng's expression turned serious. He lifted the blanket and got out of bed. They had been sleeping in the open all this time. They slept with their clothes on. After getting out of bed, he grabbed his sword and quietly left the governor's office with Gu Jiao. In order not to be noticed by the 3 people, they followed them from a distance. At this moment, the 2 of them were hiding on a roof. Gu Chengfeng looked at the 3 people who were relieving themselves in front of him. He raised his hand and covered Gu Jiao's eyes. Gu Jiao was speechless. Thank you. I wasn't interested anyway. Gu Chengfeng whispered. Do you think they're remnants of the previous dynasty or masters of the Qin kingdom? Remnants of the previous dynasty. Gu Jiao said, without hesitation. Are you sure? Gu Chengfeng was surprised. Gu Jiao nodded. She had thought about it carefully just now. The remnants of the previous dynasty had colluded with the Qin kingdom's army. It looked like they were all working together, but in reality, they all had their own goals. For example, it seemed like the Qin kingdom's army's idea to let the 100,000 Gu clan soldiers never return. And it seemed more like the remnants of the previous dynasty's plan to deal with the Gu clan's grandfather and grandson. She didn't know how the Gu clan had offended the remnants of the previous dynasty for them to take such savage revenge. Actually, Gu Chengfeng also felt that it was more likely the remnants of the previous dynasty. After all, his grandfather had fallen into the hands of the remnants of the previous dynasty. Gu Chengfeng continued. Princess Ning and son-in-law is also a remnant of the previous dynasty. And according to the information I gathered from the Chenji Pavilion, he's also a member of the previous dynasty's imperial family. Gu Jiao didn't know about this. After the three of them finished relieving themselves, Gu Chengfeng removed the hand covering Gu Jiao's eyes and continued chasing with Gu Jiao. As he chased, he felt that something was wrong. That doesn't seem to be the direction to Yi City. He had studied the map several times before going to bed. If they walked along this official road, they would reach Yi City if they headed east and Lingguan City if they headed west. They're going to Lingguan City. Gu Chengfeng sucked in a cold breath of air suspiciously. Why are they going to Lingguan City? Shouldn't they be going to Yi City? Could it be they've secretly moved their base? Gu Chengfeng wasn't stupid. After thinking for a while, he figured out the crux of the matter. If that was really the case, then his grandfather definitely wasn't in Yi City. He had gone through so much trouble to rush over, only to end up empty-handed. Empty-handed was secondary. Those people had drugged him and moved their base. They had probably already set up a trap in Yi City. Gu Chengfeng's face was filled with shock. So I'm just sending my head to them. Gu Jiao cast a sidelong glance at him and silently clapped her hands in her heart. Congratulations, you're right. The two of them chased for half the night. When it was close to daybreak, those three people finally stopped. Instead, they took the medallion and entered residence. It's the Lingguan City governor's residence. Gu Chengfeng lay on the eaves of a building and turned his head to whisper to Gu Jiao behind him. Lingguan City had fallen, and the governor's residence had long since fallen into the hands of the remnants of the previous dynasty and the Chun Kingdom's army. The governor's residence was heavily guarded. Judging from their armor, there were both Chun Kingdom soldiers and remnants of the previous dynasty's army. Could grandfather have been locked up here? Gu Chengfeng muttered. Gu Jiao thought he was asking her and replied, I'm not sure. She hadn't dreamed of this detail. She only knew that Gu Chengfeng and the old marquis had been beheaded in Lingguan City. Their heads had also been hung on the city walls. The newest chapter of this book isn't finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels will be updated even faster. Millions of novels to read for free. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhpqg.com/8964-2_896/1096-678779. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhpqg.com Biku Pavilion's mobile reading website. zhpqg.com. Chapter 484. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that cannot be found online are all available here. After the war, Lingguan City was devastated. There were more soldiers than civilians on the streets. Innocent civilians could be seen being taken away for no reason from time to time. Gu Chengfeng reminded himself again and again that he was a bandit and that the lives of civilians had nothing to do with him. However, when he saw these things happen in front of him, the blood in his body still surged with anger. He clenched his fists tightly. It took a great deal of effort to resist the urge to kill those Chun soldiers who bullied civilians. He could not expose himself. It was not time yet, let's find an inn. He turned around, afraid that if he looked any longer, he would not be able to resist charging over. Okay. Gu Jiao nodded calmly. She seemed to be indifferent to everything. The lives of others were not worth mentioning in her eyes. However, she had traveled thousands of miles to this dangerous and bitter cold place for the idiot and brother she spoke of. Gu Chengfeng suddenly felt that he could not understand her. The two of them found an inn nearby. The inn had signs of being robbed. The shopkeeper's face had a shocking palm print. As for the workers in the inn, they were either injured or in pain. Their eyes were red and swollen. They were picking up the chairs that had fallen on the ground. There were no other guests in the inn. They did not know if no one was staying or if they had all been scared away. Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng came to the counter. The innkeeper pulled himself together and looked at the two of them. His voice was still trembling after choking with sobs. "Are you two guests eating or staying?" Gu Chengfeng said to the shopkeeper. "Give us a room. If there's food, send it up. If there isn't, then forget it. The two of you, please follow me." The shopkeeper held back his grief and brought Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng to the second floor. He pointed to a room that could be considered clean and tidy. "This is our inn's best room. 100 copper coins a night, including 2 meals. 100 copper coins." Gu Chengfeng suspected that he had heard wrong. The shopkeeper hurriedly said, "Do you think it's expensive? In that case, I can give you a discount. How about 80 copper coins?" Gu Chengfeng opened his mouth. "That's not what I meant. 100 copper coins was really too cheap. They had never stayed in such a cheap inn on their way here. Moreover, it was the best room with 2 meals included. 100 copper coins it is." Gu Chengfeng couldn't bear to see the shopkeeper lose, so he didn't raise the price. The shopkeeper said gratefully, "Thank you, sir. Then I will go and prepare the food for you, but you may have to wait for a while." Gu Chengfeng understood what he meant. Those soldiers had ransacked the inn, so they probably didn't even let go of the good stuff in the kitchen. They had to go buy groceries again. Gu Chengfeng had mixed feelings. Gu Jiao continued to eat and sleep as if she didn't have a care in the world. There wasn't the slightest bit of annoyance or pity on her face. The corner of Gu Chengfeng's mouth twitched as he looked at a certain someone who was sleeping soundly on the bed while hugging her red-tasseled spear. How could a little girl's heart be bigger than a man's? After dinner, the two were ready to set off. The two of them changed into their night suits, put on their masks, and prepared to set off. Unexpectedly, as soon as Gu Chengfeng opened the door, he immediately closed it again. "Someone's here?" Gu Jiao asked. Gu Chengfeng's throat moved. He composed himself and said, "It's the Chun Nation soldiers." A large group. A large group meant that there were dozens of them. They filled the inn's main hall almost instantly. For a moment, Gu Chengfeng suspected that he and Gu Jiao's whereabouts had been exposed. Fortunately, the group sat down in the main hall. It seemed that they were only here to freeload. Gu Chengfeng secretly sighed in relief. It wasn't that he was afraid of these soldiers. If they really fought, he could deal with them alone. However, if they really fought, it would be bad if they alerted the governor's office's soldiers. There were no windows in the room. They could only wait for the group of soldiers to leave. The group of soldiers didn't know that other people were staying in the inn. They even thought that everyone here was on their side. They didn't have any qualms about talking about it. They actually let Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng hear something incredible. It turned out that Tang Yueshan had something to do with the old duke's capture. The prince consort put Princess Ning an under-house arrest. The old duke asked Tang Yueshan to borrow some archers to sneak into the princess residence to save Princess Ning. However, Tang Yueshan refused the old duke's request, saying that he wanted to send troops to eliminate the rebels. The old duke had long sensed that something was wrong. He reminded Tang Yueshan that things weren't that simple and that he shouldn't act rashly. Tang Yueshan thought that the old duke was preventing him from performing meritorious deeds. He didn't listen to the old duke's advice and stubbornly launched a night attack on the remnants of the previous dynasty. In the end, he fell into the enemy's trap. The remnants of the previous dynasty and the Chun Nation's army attacked from both sides. In the end, Tang Yueshan suffered a crushing defeat and Yi City was lost. The Chun Nation's army won the first battle. Their morale was high. On the other hand, the Zhao Nation's local army naturally didn't have much morale after seeing that the world's marshal had been defeated. They stubbornly resisted. Lingguan City and Beiyang City were easily taken by the Chun Nation's army. Gu Chengfeng said angrily, "If Tang Yueshan had listened to my grandfather wouldn't have been captured. The frontier fortress wouldn't have been lost so easily." If his grandfather hadn't been captured, whether his grandfather and Tang Yueshan had joined forces to fight the enemy, or if his grandfather had led the army after Tang Yueshan's defeat, the frontier fortress wouldn't have been lost so quickly. Gu Chengfeng frowned suspiciously. Do you think Tang Yueshan did it on purpose? On purpose, what? Gu Jiao asked. Gu Chengfeng said coldly. He lost on purpose, so that my grandfather would be captured. As the saying goes, like son, like father. If he could raise such a vicious and perverted son like Tang Ming, it's obvious that he's not a good person himself. Maybe he found out the truth about Tang Ming's death from somewhere and hated the Gu family. Tang Ming bullied Gu Yan and suffered from Gu Jiao's violent revenge. Gu Chengfeng was also involved. If Tang Yueshan knew the truth, he would have a reason to take revenge on the Gu family. Gu Jiao paused and didn't say anything. From the information revealed by the soldiers, Tang Yueshan disappeared after the defeat. Now they were searching everywhere for Tang Yueshan. If he was alive, they wanted to see him. If he was dead, they wanted to see his corpse. The more Gu Chengfeng thought about it, the more suspicious he felt Tang Yueshan was. Even the defeat of the army was very likely to be part of Tang Yueshan's scheme. He's a man who enjoys grandiose achievements. If he lost the city first, and then took it back, His Majesty would see how difficult it was for him to fight this battle. When he returned to the capital, he would receive double the reward and the emperor's favor. Gu Jiao tapped his shoulder. Gu Chengfeng was in the middle of analyzing Tang Yueshan's situation. He was suddenly interrupted and was stunned. What's wrong? Gu Jiao pointed downstairs. They're gone. Gu Chengfeng opened his mouth. All right, let's go. Gu Jiao glanced at him and said, You can continue when you come back. Gu Chengfeng choked. I don't want to talk about it. I'm a man. Don't talk so much. The man was a man of few words. On the way to the governor's mansion, he chatted with Gu Jiao all the way. Gu Jiao, the governor's mansion was heavily guarded. But for Gu Chengfeng, who could come and go freely under the watch of the dragon shadow guards, it was not too difficult. He sneaked into the mansion with Gu Jiao. Gu Jiao took out the flamboyant peacock plume mask and put on. Gu Chengfeng, no, what's the point of covering your face now? The two of them didn't know where the old duke was imprisoned. Gu Chengfeng decisively grabbed a soldier. Gu Jiao gave him a dose of drug, and the soldier fell asleep immediately. Gu Chengfeng looked at her syringe. Your drug doesn't work every time. Gu Jiao put away the syringe and said calmly, Find it yourself. Gu Chengfeng snorted. How can we find such a big mansion? Do you want to find it until dawn? Gu Jiao clapped her hands indifferently. We've already searched the Ning prince's mansion. Why should we be afraid of a mere governor's mansion? Gu Chengfeng said disapprovingly. How can it be the same? The Ning prince's mansion only had a few storerooms, and they were all in his and Princess Consort Ning's courtyard. In front of the governor's mansion is the government office, and behind it is the private mansion. We don't know where they're keeping grandfather. It could be a woodshed, a dungeon, or a secret room. Before he finished speaking, Gu Jiao pushed open the door beside her. It was a wine cellar used to store fine wine. Gu Chengfeng shook his head. There was no need to look for such a place. It was not a good place to keep a hostage. His gaze swept across the room, and he was stunned. Gee, grandfather? The old man, with shackles on his hands and feet, covered in bruises and fainted on the ground, was none other than his grandfather. Gu Chengfeng was stunned. How did you know my grandfather was imprisoned here? Gu Jiao spread her hands. I don't know. I just randomly found it. Gu Chengfeng's mouth twitched. What kind of luck did this girl have? She could even find him here. What happened to searching until dawn? What happened to the 100 ways he thought of to avoid detection by the Chun soldiers? Was there no place to use it? Digression, Happy New Year. May everyone be able to ride the waves like Jiao Jiao in 2021. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_8964286/1096666188. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuga mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 485. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. Gu Chengfeng felt that the remnants of the previous dynasty and the Chen army must have been out of their minds to lock someone in a wine cellar. What the hell? Gu Jiao was about to enter the room. He raised his hand to stop Gu Jiao. Wait, I'll go in first. After learning that he had almost sent someone to their death, Gu Chengfeng became especially vigilant. He left Gu Jiao outside and went into the wine cellar to carefully inspect it. After confirming that there were no hidden traps or dangers, he said to Gu Jiao, "Come in." Gu Jiao entered the room and closed the door behind her. There were no windows in the wine cellar. Once the door was closed, the room became so dark that one couldn't even see one's fingers. Gu Chengfeng took out a match. After lighting it, he went to the old marquee and knelt on the cold ground, reaching out to help the old marquee up. Wait. This time, it was Gu Jiao who stopped Gu Chengfeng's hand. The old marquis's breathing was very weak and shallow. He didn't look normal. As a doctor, she had an almost instinctive intuition about this situation. Gu Jiao took off the red tasseled spear on her back and placed it on the ground. Then she knelt down on one knee beside Gu Chengfeng and used the light of the match to see the old marquis's appearance. It wasn't enough to describe him as covered in cuts and bruises. He had clearly been brutally tortured. There wasn't a spot on his body that wasn't covered in blood. "Bring the match closer," Gu Jiao said to Gu Chengfeng. Gu Chengfeng brought the match closer to him. The light from the fire could actually hide some of one's complexion. But even so, the old marquis's paleness couldn't be hidden. Gu Chengfeng's heart clenched. His Adam's apple bobbed as he endured and called out in a small voice, "Grandfather, grandfather." The old marquis didn't respond. Gu Chengfeng's heart clenched even tighter. Gu Jiao's expression did not change in the slightest. She calmly took off the old marquis's clothes and began to check his injuries one by one. For Gu Chengfeng to be able to train to his current level, he naturally had his fair share of injuries and had seen others get injured. However, if the injured person was his own grandfather, he didn't dare to look down. He didn't know how this girl was able to remain so calm. After all, she wasn't Gu Jiao's real mother. To her, his grandfather was just an ordinary patient. The lighter wouldn't last long, and there wasn't enough light. Gu Jiao opened the small medicine box and took out a small emergency flashlight. She turned it on and handed it to Gu Chengfeng. "Light it." Gu Chengfeng was no longer surprised by her strange things. Wasn't it just a night luminescent pearl? The only difference was that the light was longer and brighter. Gu Chengfeng extinguished the fire and turned on a small flashlight for Gu Jiao. "Is my grandfather seriously injured?" "Yes," Gu Jiao said. Her movements were very light, but she didn't miss a single bone. "He has both internal and external injuries. There are many comminuted fractures on his body." Gu Chengfeng was shocked. Broken into powder? Gu Jiao sighed. If it's broken into more than 3 pieces, it's called comminuted fractures. She didn't say that it must have been broken into powder. It wasn't a bone crusher. In addition to the fractures, there were many whip wounds all over his body. The blood on his body was left by these whip wounds. These whip wounds looked scary, but they weren't the main cause of the old marquis's loss of consciousness. Gu Jiao took out a sphygmomanometer and measured the old marquis's blood pressure. Strange, why is his blood pressure so low? The reason for the old marquis's loss of consciousness was found. It was hemorrhagic shock. However, the old Marquis's whip wounds were only superficial and mottled with blood. In fact, the total amount of bleeding was not large. Internal bleeding? Gu Jiao murmured and narrowed her eyes. Gu Qingfeng didn't understand a single word she said. Even if he understood, he felt that it might not be what he understood. Gu Jiao took a pair of gloves from the small medicine box and put them on. Then she took out a long needle. Gu Qingfeng's eyebrows twitched. What was this girl doing now? After watching Gu Jiao's suture, Gu Qinglin's surgery, Gu Qingfeng hadn't eaten a single bite of meat for half a year. Gu Qingfeng's psychological trauma had just recovered. He couldn't let this girl poison his little heart. He decisively turned his face away. "Hey," Gu Jiao called him. "I'm not scared," he said sternly. "The flashlight is crooked." Gu Jiao reminded him. "Crooked? Where is it crooked?" Gu Qingfeng didn't dare to look back. Gu Jiao pulled his hand and moved the flashlight forward. "Don't move." Gu Qingfeng, "Okay." Gu Jiao performed a peritoneal puncture on the old Marquis. The blood extracted was not coagulated, which meant that the patient had bloody ascites. Combined with his injuries, it should be a substantial organ rupture. Gu Jiao put away the needle and quietly looked at the old Marquis's abdomen. Then, she began to gently press down along the direction of his ribs. When she pressed on the upper left abdomen, his body spasmed slightly. He didn't completely lose consciousness. He could still feel a little pain. That should be where the problem was. Gu Jiao's eyes turned cold. This place was the spleen. "Are you done with the examination? If you are, let's hurry up and get my grandfather out of here. I feel that it's not safe here. Those people might come back at any time. We can't leave." Gu Jiao said he's injured. "Can't we go back to the inn to heal? I know that injured people can't be moved easily. I'll go get a stretcher. I won't let his injury worsen." Gu Jiao looked at the blood pressure that was still falling and shook her head. "We can't wait." "What do you mean by can't wait?" Gu Qingfeng turned around and looked at her with a stunned expression. Gu Jiao said he needs surgery. Gu Qingfeng was startled again. Here? Gu Jiao nodded solemnly. "Here." Seeing that Gu Qingfeng was very hesitant, she added, "If we don't do the surgery immediately, he will die." Gu Qingfeng and Gu Jiao had been together for so long. Of course, he knew that this girl liked to ask for a lot of money when receiving medical fees. She never exaggerated about anything else. Gu Qingfeng looked at Gu Jiao deeply. "Are you sure you want to do this?" He didn't need to remind her how risky the surgery was in the enemy's territory. She was saving his grandfather, but she was also risking her own life. He continued, "Once we are discovered, the three of us may not be able to leave." Gu Jiao took out the scalpel without hesitation. "I'll do it as soon as possible." "Why are you doing this? Do you recognize him as your grandfather?" "No." Gu Jiao opened the scalpel. "He's not my grandfather, but it's my duty to do anything for my brother." She was serious about becoming his sworn brother. Gu Qingfeng, who had completely misunderstood, felt his heart ache and was moved. It turned out that in her heart, he was her brother. "Gu Jiao, you think too much. You are not my brother. The one lying on the ground is." "Do you need me to do anything?" Gu Qingfeng asked righteously. Gu Jiao decided not to argue with him about seniority for the time being. She took out the scalpel and anesthetic. "Find something to block the crack of the door. Don't let any light pass." There was no rag in the wine cellar, so Gu Qingfeng tore off his underwear and cut it into strips with a dagger to block the crack of the door. It was cold in the frontier fortress, and there was no Kong in the wine cellar. In order to prevent the old duke from hypothermia during the operation, Gu Jiao asked Gu Qingfeng to dismantle the table, pour some spirits on it, and make a small fire. Snowflakes began to fall from the sky, hitting the eaves and the ground with a pitter-patter, perfectly covering the sound of the burning firewood. Gu Jiao's movements were very light and her expression was very calm. She put the old duke on an intravenous drip and asked Gu Qingfeng to find a shelf to hang the bottle. The old duke was bleeding badly, so it was not convenient to use epidural anesthesia. Gu Jiao gave him general anesthesia. The old marquis's last shred of consciousness disappeared, and he fell into a deep sleep. The conditions at the scene were not suitable for using surgical drapes. Gu Jiao disinfected a large area of the old duke's body and directly made a cut on his upper left abdomen. Blood and ascites flowed out of the wound. Gu Qingfeng even held his breath. Gu Jiao completely separated the spleen and smoothly lifted it out of the incision. Gu Qingfeng only took one look and almost fainted on the spot. Gu Jiao calmly continued the operation in front of her. She found the active bleeding point on the spleen and sutured it. If the bleeding still could not be stopped after suturing, she could only choose to remove part of the spleen or the whole spleen. The spleen was not the appendix, so it was fine to cut it off. The sequelae of splenectomy were lifelong. Once the operation was done, the old duke would never be able to go to the battlefield again. Time passed by slowly. The snowflakes outside had stopped at some point, and the governor's residence fell into complete silence. From time to time, there was a crackling sound from a fire. Every time there was a crackling sound, Gu Qingfeng's heart tightened. Gu Jiao devoted herself to her hands, which were already dripping with blood. The sutures were very effective. There was no need to remove the spleen. She only needed to suture all the cracks. The spleen repair was completed, and the operation was in the final stage. The next step was to suture the wound on the abdomen. Gu Qingfeng clenched his fists and silently prayed in his heart, "Please don't let anyone come. Please don't let anyone come. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet." For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more complete. Millions of novels are free to read. There are all the novels that you can't find online here. https://www.zhbqg.com/8964-_89642826/1096455417. HTML Genius. Memorize the website address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuga mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 486. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are read for free. There are novels with connotations that cannot be found online here. This courtyard was very remote. Usually, no one would come here. As long as there was not much commotion in the wine cellar, it would not attract the patrolling guards. Yet, there were people who came. From the sound of footsteps and armor rubbing against each other, it was 2 adult soldiers. Generally speaking, this governor's office was controlled by the remnants of the previous dynasty. The Chun army was mainly stationed outside the governor's office. Thus, Gu Qingfeng deduced that these 2 were the minions of the remnants of the previous dynasty. Gu Qingfeng quietly came behind the door. He could not see the situation outside clearly. He could only try his best to pay attention to the movements and sounds of the people coming. At this time, Gu Jiao had already started to suture the abdominal wound. Seeing this, Gu Qingfeng understood that the surgery was almost done. However, the closer it was to the end, the more important it was to not make any mistakes. Gu Qingfeng's heart was slightly raised. The 2 soldiers entered the courtyard and walked toward the wine cellar. One of them pulled his companion and said, "Okay, there is no one else here. Take it out. Lower your voice. Don't let anyone hear you," his companion said in a low voice. Okay. I won't say it loudly." The soldier's voice was lower, but his tone was more urgent. "Don't just talk to me in a low voice. Where is the thing I asked you to bring? Take it out." Hearing this, Gu Qingfeng understood that the 2 were not here to check on his grandfather. His heart sank back into his stomach. However, he did not dare to be careless. He still held the two hidden weapons tightly in his hands. His companion took out a small porcelain bottle and handed it to the soldier. Here. The soldier pulled out the stopper and sniffed the bottle. His tone was somewhat disgusted. What is this smell? It's all the same smell. Is it really effective? Won't you know if it is effective after you try it? Then have you tried it yourself? Can you really do it 7 times in one night? Hearing this, Gu Chengfeng could not help but frown. What 7 times in one night? There were too many dirty words. He really wanted to shut their mouths. He turned back to look at Gu Jiao, who was treating the old duke. Gu Jiao was almost done. This girl was treating him so seriously. She didn't hear those dirty words, did she? Just tell me whether you want it or not. Yes. How could he not want it? How much? It sold for 1 tael of silver outside. The boss is my friend, so he gave it to me at a cheaper price of 200 copper coins. If I were to sell it to someone else, I would have to pay an additional 50 copper coins. You're my brother, so based on our friendship, I won't charge you more. Gu Chengfeng sneered in his heart. This kind of despicable thing was already expensive for 10 copper coins. How could they be brothers? In the end, the soldier decided to be a sucker and spent 200 copper coins to buy the bottle of all-aspect nourishment pills. Let's go, the soldier said to his companion. Wait, what happened? Over there. What's going on over there? The soldier looked around and asked. Oh, the wine cellar. Gu Chengfeng's heart tightened. I heard that Lingguan City's governor's office's wine is newer red, which has been stored for more than 10 years. His companion walked towards the wine cellar as he spoke. The soldier pulled him back. Hey, who was the one who said not to be discovered? You're hugging a wine jar in the middle of the night. Do you think you're not discovered fast enough? If you want to drink wine, I have plenty in my house. I'll give you a jar when we get back. Ah, all right. His companion was convinced by the soldier and left the courtyard with him. Gu Chengfeng finally let out a sigh of relief. His entire back was soaked in cold sweat, and his forehead was sticky. He raised a hand to wipe his sweat and asked Gu Jiao, "Is it done?" Gu Jiao cut off the last thread and used gauze to cover the wound. Not yet. The fracture needs to be fixed. The old marquis's 4 limbs were fractured and needed to be stopped first. Otherwise, it would be very dangerous to move. Half of the table was thrown into the fire. There was still half left. Gu Jiao first made do with cutting a few boards. Gu Chengfeng went over to help her. But at this time, something unexpected happened. The 2 people who had already left actually turned back in a hurry. Not good. It's Captain Liu. If he finds out that we didn't patrol properly and came here without permission, he will definitely punish us. It was that soldier's voice. Hurry and hide, his companion said. Where do we hide? The soldier asked fearfully. The wine cellar. Gu Chengfeng's eyebrows jumped. His hand that was fixing the boards paused. He instinctively glanced at Gu Jiao. Gu Jiao acted as if she didn't hear anything and calmly and quickly continued what she was doing. Gu Chengfeng's eyes moved and he looked coldly in the direction of the door. Why can't the door be opened? Is it locked from the inside? Impossible, let me do it. The soldier's companion pushed open the door with great force, and a flash of fire suddenly entered his eyes. He was slightly startled, but before he could react to why there was fire inside, Gu Chengfeng shot out 2 concealed weapons. His body stiffened and he fell forward. He didn't fall to the ground. Gu Chengfeng's figure flashed in front of him and caught him. Everything happened in a flash. The soldier didn't have time to react. Gu Chengfeng's other hidden weapon cut his throat. Gu Chengfeng caught the 2 of them one by one and dragged them into the house without a trace. He quickly and steadily closed the door without making a single sound. Gu Chengfeng placed the 2 corpses on the ground. He sat on the side, leaning against the door behind him as he trembled and panted. He was a thief, not an assassin. No matter how many times he killed someone, he couldn't get used to it. But he could not kill them. Captain Liu led a group of patrolling soldiers as they walked past the courtyard. Gu Chengfeng held his breath and minimized his presence to the minimum. Gu Jiao finished cutting all the wooden boards. Next, they only needed to fix them so that they wouldn't make too much noise. But as luck would have it, the old Marquis showed signs of waking up. While he was in a daze, he coughed out of the blue. "What's that sound?" In response to Lord Liu, "It seems to be coming from the wine cellar. There's a hostage in the wine cellar." "Captain Liu, is it the old Marquis of the Gu army?" "Subordinate, it's him. He was interrogated this afternoon and was injured." "Captain Liu, why is he in the wine cellar?" "This." The subordinate smiled embarrassedly. Why was he locked in the wine cellar and not the dungeon? Wasn't it because someone had disobeyed the orders of the higher-ups and lynched the old Marquis? They were afraid that they would be discovered in the dungeon, so they locked him in the wine cellar first. Captain Liu wasn't stupid and quickly figured out the crux of the matter. He was only a small captain and couldn't afford to offend the person who lynched the old Marquis. But he was on duty tonight. If something happened to the hostage, he couldn't escape the blame. "Go and see how he is," he ordered. The two subordinates walked towards the wine cellar together. At this time, Gu Jiao finished fixing the old Marquis's left arm and started fixing his right arm. Gu Chengfeng took a deep breath and closed his eyes. What was to come still came. Gu Chengfeng didn't give the two a chance to push the door open. He rushed out and shot two hidden weapons at the two soldiers in front of him. "Assassin." Captain Liu pulled out the sword at his waist and led the rest of his subordinates to rush towards Gu Chengfeng. This group of people, including Captain Liu, were just ordinary soldiers. They weren't very skilled, and Gu Chengfeng didn't feel much pressure dealing with them. However, Captain Liu seemed to have noticed that Gu Chengfeng was skilled. He didn't hesitate to blow the wooden whistle at his waist. A tall and powerful figure flew through the air and kicked Gu Chengfeng in the chest. Gu Chengfeng fell heavily at the door of the wine cellar and spat out a mouthful of blood. Gu Chengfeng clutched his chest. He recognized that this man in black was one of the masters that he and Gu Jiao had been tracking. He also had companions. They also descended from the sky and blocked the door to the courtyard. No wonder he didn't notice when they drugged him. His skills were almost on par with His Majesty's Dragon Shadow Guards. Gu Chengfeng held his chest in pain with one hand and used his other hand to support his body with the sword. He stood up with a fierce look in his eyes. "Archers, get ready," Captain Liu yelled. A row of archers filed in and knelt on one knee. They drew their bows and aimed at Gu Chengfeng. The Marquis, whose right leg was fixed, seemed to have sensed that something was about to happen to his grandson. He opened his eyes slightly and tilted his head to look outside the door. He had been unconscious for too long, and his vision was a little blurry. He could only vaguely see a familiar figure stubbornly holding the long sword in his hand and guarding the people in the room. The Marquis's eyes suddenly welled up with tears. Gu Chengfeng didn't know how many times he had been kicked down by the master in black. Every time he fell, he would spit out a mouthful of blood. However, he would always stand up again. The master in black seemed to be tired of it. After knocking Gu Chengfeng down for the last time, he stepped on Gu Chengfeng's chest with his long boot. He gestured to another master in black. His companion understood and strode towards the wine cellar. Gu Chengfeng grabbed a hidden weapon in his palm. However, before he could shoot it, his hand was stepped on by the man in black. It was time to end everything. The master in black lifted his icy cold boot and ruthlessly stepped on Gu Chengfeng's head. Heavy snow suddenly fell from the sky. Snowflakes fluttered down. "Ah!" a sharp scream. The master in black outside the wine cellar was dragged in by a strong force. Almost at the same time, a red-tasseled spear suddenly shot out from the wine cellar, carrying a trembling sound breaking through the air. It pierced through the flying snow, and with a whoosh, it pierced through the heart of the black-clothed expert, sending him flying and fiercely nailing him to the hard wall. Everyone was stunned. In the next second, they all looked towards the wine cellar. They didn't know when, but there was a slender little figure at the door. In the sky full of flying snow, a young man with long hair like ink, eyes cold and murderous, like an Azura from hell. Digression. Just ask if Jiao Jiao is handsome or not. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels that can't be found online are all here. https://www.zhbqg.com/8964/2_89642_1096444484. HTML Genius will remember this site's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuga mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 487. The newest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. The youth's fair and slender right hand was carrying a person. It was the other black-clothed expert that had been caught and thrown into the wine cellar. He had long since lost his breath and was thrown into the snow in the courtyard by the youth, like a sack. The youth's throw was not very strong, but it made everyone feel an unbridled, irreverent, insolent, and arrogant aura. No one knew how the youth did it. Just now, their attention was all on the first black-clothed expert. They were watching him stomp on Gu Qingfeng's head until it exploded. This was a bloody, ruthless scene that made one's blood spurt out. When the second black-clothed expert went to the wine cellar to look for someone, everyone only heard a scream. They didn't even think that the scream came from their own expert. They thought that their own expert had quickly entered the room and caught the assassin's accomplice. The scream came from the assassin's accomplice. And now, of their own 2 experts, one was impaled by a spear and nailed to the wall. The other was crushed to death by the youth and thrown to the ground. This scene was simply too shocking and too strange. Everyone's voices were stuck in their throats. Even their breathing unconsciously stopped. Only Gu Qingfeng was lying in a puddle of blood mixed with snow. His body suddenly relaxed. Was this girl finally done with the operation? He thought that he wouldn't be able to wait. It's good that she's out. It's good that she's out. Gu Qingfeng coughed up blood while his body trembled. He smiled as if relieved of a burden. More than half of the 3 black-clothed experts were killed in an instant. The third black-clothed expert was the first to recover from his shock. He pulled out the soft sword at his waist and attacked Gu Jiao with a murderous aura. When dealing with Gu Qingfeng, he didn't make a move because there was no need to. But this youth killed 2 of his companions as soon as he came out. Even if he didn't want to, he had to admit that this youth, who was much younger than everyone present, gave him a strong sense of danger. So much so that he even used his weapon. Gu Jiao dealt with all changes by remaining unchanged. When he attacked her, she did not immediately move. Instead, the moment his soft sword was about to strangle her neck, she raised her left hand and shot out a long thread with a hook to entangle the other's soft sword. Then, she pulled hard and used the force to throw herself out. As if she had qigong, she soared into the air and shuttled through the flying snow. She stepped on the opposite wall and pulled out the red-tasseled spear with her bare hands. She nimbly turned around, and at the same time flipped the red-tasseled spear in her palm. The spearhead aimed at the last black-clothed expert and mercilessly shot over. There were no fancy moves, and it was impossible to tell which school of kung fu it was from. But killing was done in an instant. Perhaps when the old Marquis taught her spear techniques, he did not expect her to be able to turn every move into such a fierce, killing move. The third black-robed man didn't even have time to fight back. His entire body stiffened, and he fell to his knees with a plop. Heavy snow fell, and his head lowered, no longer making a sound. Gu Jiao pulled out her spear, and he also fell to the ground. Captain Lu and all the other soldiers couldn't help but take a big step back. This youth was too scary. It wasn't true that his kung fu was high, but his murderous intent was something that even death soldiers couldn't match. The strong were afraid of the strong, and the strong were afraid of those who didn't care about their lives. And this youth was precisely that kind of person who didn't care about his life. Gu Jiao was still wearing that coquettish peacock plume mask. Coupled with her murderous intent, she gave off an inexplicable sense of strangeness. For a moment, no one dared to step forward to catch her. Gu Jiao came in front of Gu Chengfeng, holding the red tasseled spear. She looked down at him from above. "Can you still walk?" Gu Chengfeng wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and panted. "Yes." "Oh." Gu Jiao nodded and reached out her hand. Gu Chengfeng suddenly, "Wait, if I can't walk, are you planning to leave me here?" Gu Chengfeng pulled Gu Jiao's hand and stood up from the snow. Captain Lu and the others glared at Gu Jiao, but they didn't dare to actually catch Gu Jiao. Instead, wherever Gu Jiao went, the soldiers would tremble and take a few steps back. This really scared Gu Jiao silly. It wasn't until Gu Jiao walked back to the wine cellar and carried the unconscious old duke out that Captain Lu finally reacted. Fighting Gu Jiao was courting death, but if they let Gu Jiao go, it would be difficult for them to escape death if they were to be held responsible. Captain Lu gritted his teeth and made up his mind. He raised his sword and said, "Are you all cowards? Are you all scared out of your wits by a brat who's still wet behind the ears? If we let them go today, none of us will be able to live when His Excellency pursues this matter. 2 of the 3 of them are already injured. That brat is carrying another one on his back. He won't be able to deal with us. Attack together. Chop them up. Attack together. Chop them up." Some of the soldiers agreed passionately. Captain Lu took the lead and charged out. When he and the other soldiers saw this, they were also filled with bloodlust. It was mainly because they saw that Gu Jiao was carrying an injury on her back and really thought that she was at her wit's end. Little did they know that Gu Jiao had tied the old duke tightly to her back with strips of cloth. She freed up 2 hands, one gripping her spear tightly while the other tossed the small basket on her back to Gu Chengfeng. Then, she waved her hand and threw out the Blackfire Pearl, blasting a path of blood. The huge commotion shocked the entire governor's office. Even the Chun soldiers stationed outside the office were alarmed by the series of loud noises. However, Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng moved extremely quickly. By the time a large number of soldiers arrived to surround them, they had already jumped over the wall of the governor's office and mounted the horses that had been hidden nearby. There were 2 horses in total. Gu Jiao rode one with the old duke, while Gu Chengfeng rode the other horse alone. The 3 quickly disappeared from the streets of Lingguan City. "Sir." Near the wine cellar, Captain Lu, who had been severely injured by the explosion, knelt down and bowed to a man wearing a silver fox cloak. The man was about 30 years old. He was tall and sturdy, with cold features and deep eyes. His every movement was filled with nobility. He didn't look angry, but everyone who was still alive felt as if their throats were being strangled and they couldn't breathe. The man did not pay any attention to Captain Lu, who was kneeling on the ground, nor did he pay any attention to the other soldiers who had been blown up. He only came to the remains of the Blackfire Pearl and squatted down. He touched the remains with his slender fingers, and a trace of coldness and doubt flashed across his face. "Yen Kingdom," he muttered. Captain Lu didn't hear what he said clearly. It wasn't that his voice was too soft, but that his ears were muddled from the explosion. He asked, "Sir, should we chase?" "Chase," the man in the silver fox cloak said calmly. "I want him alive." Ah, that brat was so powerful. It was already difficult to kill him, but to capture him alive, wasn't this? Captain Lu wanted to say that he was making things too difficult for the soldiers, but he also understood that this lord would never take back his words. They either had to obey or die. The cold wind whistled and snow swirled in the air. Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng ran endlessly in the night against the flying snow. Their hands and feet were frozen, and their bodies were gradually losing feeling. Gu Jiao's long eyelashes were covered in frost. However, thanks to the heavy snow, their whereabouts were concealed. Gu Chengfeng wanted to ask where Gu Jiao was going, but his mouth was numb from the cold, and he couldn't open his mouth at all. Just as the three of them were about to turn into three small popsicles, Gu Jiao finally stopped the horse. The moment she grabbed the reins and pulled, Gu Jiao's hand hurt so much that it felt like it was broken. Proud arrived. Proud arrived? Gu Chengfeng immediately blurted out. Gu Jiao responded. She wasn't much better than Gu Chengfeng and had a hard time talking. She slowly loosened her stiff hand, but the reins were already frozen in her palm. The red-tasseled spear wasn't frozen in her hand, but she had held onto it for too long and couldn't open her stiff fingers for a while. The two of them used a lot of energy to get off the horse. The horse was exhausted and was panting heavily. "Where are we?" Gu Chengfeng asked with a pale face. "I don't know." Gu Jiao wasn't familiar with the terrain of the frontier fortress. She was only relying on her intuition to avoid the pursuers of the previous dynasty. "Let's walk forward and see," she said. She raised her hand that had regained a bit of feeling and grabbed the horse's stiff hand. Her other hand grabbed her red-tasseled spear. Gu Chengfeng remembered that she originally carried the red-tasseled spear on her back, but now that she was carrying her grandfather, she could only hold the red-tasseled spear in her hand. "Give it to me." He reached out his hand and said, "You won't be able to carry it." Gu Jiao said, "How can I not be able to carry it? I'm a man." The belittled Gu Chengfeng raised his hand to take Gu Jiao's red-tasseled spear. Gu Jiao glanced at him indifferently and let go. "Fuck." Gu Chengfeng knelt on the ground and couldn't help but curse. What kind of red-tasseled spear is this? Why is it so heavy? Also, he didn't look carefully just now because he was running for his life. Now that he looked carefully, his heart almost stopped beating. How could there be such an ugly red-tasseled spear in this world? Were the big red flowers on the spear serious? Also, who had braided the red tassels into pigtails? Gu Chengfeng almost cried because of the ugliness. Carrying this red-tasseled spear on the battlefield, it was so ugly that it could kill a bunch of enemies. Fortunately, she used cloth to wrap the red-tasseled spear on the way, or else Gu Chengfeng seriously suspected that he would be blinded by the ugliness. "I already said you can't carry it." Gu Jiao automatically ignored the disdain and shock in Gu Chengfeng's eyes. She grabbed the red-tasseled spear and led the horse forward. "I can't carry it because I'm injured." Gu Chengfeng decided to save his dignity as a man. "Why don't you wait until I recover and see if I can carry it?" Gu Jiao didn't turn around and waved her hand. "You'll talk after you recover." Gu Chengfeng's face darkened, and he led his horse to follow. The two of them seemed to have entered a forest deep in the mountains, but they quickly passed through the forest again. "There's a family over there," Gu Chengfeng said. "Yes." Gu Jiao nodded. She also saw it. It didn't look like a normal villager's house, but more like a hunter's house. The two led their horses over. Even though Gu Chengfeng was injured, he still pulled Gu Jiao behind him and raised his hand to knock on the door. Gu Jiao said, "No need to knock, there's no one." Gu Chengfeng frowned strangely. "You heard it again? Did this girl have dog ears?" Gu Jiao directly pushed open the door and walked in. This was a small wooden house with 2 rooms. The central room was connected to the bedroom, and there was a simple stove and cooking utensils in the corner of the central room. There was a bit of frozen leftovers in the pot. In this kind of climate, frozen leftovers wouldn't spoil for a month or 2, so Gu Jiao couldn't tell how many days this pot of leftovers was left. But judging from the dust on the stove and the bed, someone had lived in the house in the last 3 days. She didn't know if the owner of a house had gone out or been captured by the Chun army and the remnants of the previous dynasty. Gu Jiao said to Gu Chengfeng, "Let's stay here for a night." Gu Chengfeng looked around and sighed, "That's the only way." The frontier fortress was too cold. The 3 of them would definitely freeze to death outside. The 2 beds were placed at right angles, one against the inner wall and the other against the side wall. Gu Jiao placed the old marquee on the bed against the inner wall. Then she pointed to the other bed and said to Gu Chengfeng, "Lie down." "What for?" Gu Chengfeng asked. Gu Jiao took the small basket from his back and said, "Injury." "Oh." Gu Chengfeng made an "oh" sound and obediently lay down on the other bed. It wasn't that he didn't want to squeeze in with his grandfather, but the beds here were all made of bamboo. It was difficult for one person to even turn over. It was too cold in the house. Gu Jiao first went to get a bundle of firewood and a charcoal brazier. After the fire was lit, the two of them felt much warmer. Gu Jiao began to examine Gu Chengfeng's injury. To be honest, Gu Chengfeng's injury was quite serious. If it were someone else, they would have been dead long ago, but he could still jump around. He was worthy of being called an expert at taking beatings. Gu Jiao took out iodophor and cleaned the wound on Gu Chengfeng's shoulder. Gu Chengfeng suddenly said, "Hey, what happened to you just now?" "What do you mean what happened?" Gu Jiao asked. "It's you." Gu Chengfeng thought for a bit and didn't know where to start asking. Should he ask her where she got her killer moves, or where she got her ability to treat illnesses? She was like a demon when she killed people, but when she healed the injured and dying, she was like a Buddha. It was really contradictory and strange. Gu Chengfeng's gaze fell on her serious little face. He opened his mouth and asked, "What did you do before? I mean before you came here to pretend to be Gu Jiao's mother?" She did a lot of work." "Was you an assassin?" Gu Chengfeng asked. "Or maybe a doctor?" Gu Chengfeng said in his heart. "Something like that." Gu Jiao said carelessly. "What do you mean something like that?" "Yes means yes, no means no." Gu Chengfeng muttered and suddenly thought of something. He was silent for a moment. "When we were in the governor's mansion, I thought you lost control." The moment Gu Jiao came out of the wine cellar, her killing intent was too strong. Even now, when he recalled it, he still felt frightened. "I didn't lose control," Gu Jiao said. "She didn't lose control every time. Otherwise, she wouldn't have lived until now. She actually didn't know what she was like when she lost control, but Princess Xinyang said her killing intent was heavier than death soldiers. Then when she lost control, she should kill people. After killing everyone, if she still didn't stop losing control, she might kill herself. In her previous life, only her godfather knew how to calm her down. It was her godfather who personally handed her a scalpel, letting her learn how to resist the temptation of blood. She had already improved a lot. After coming to this different world, she lost control twice. The first time was when her great-aunt was injured. She was promptly comforted by her, so she didn't completely lose control. The second time was when Lu Yixing cut off his finger. She didn't remember the details of that time, but she guessed that Long Yi had restrained her. Now that her great-aunt and Long Yi weren't here, she wouldn't easily lose control. "Why are you suddenly looking at me like that?" Gu Jiao's small gaze made Gu Chengfeng's eyebrows jump. Gu Jiao continued in her heart, "Otherwise you'll lose your little life." Gu Chengfeng's right arm had 5 stitches, and his forehead had 3 stitches. "It won't leave a scar, right?" Gu Chengfeng touched the gauze on his forehead and bitterly asked. Gu Jiao strangely asked, "You're worried about leaving a scar?" Gu Chengfeng bitterly said, "After all, I'm so handsome, leaving a scar would be a pity." Gu Jiao. Gu Jiao opened the small medicine box and began to carefully search inside. Gu Chengfeng didn't understand and asked, "What are you looking for?" "Eye drops." Gu Jiao said, "I suspect that your eyes are lame." Gu Chengfeng, who was obviously a handsome man. Gu Jiao finished treating all of Gu Chengfeng's injuries. Gu Chengfeng was tied up with gauze like half a mummy, especially his face, which was covered to the point that only a pair of eyes could be seen. His eyeballs turned, and his expression was somewhat indescribable. "Was my injury that serious? I seriously suspect that you're deliberately covering up my beauty." The bonfire was about to burn out, so Gu Jiao went to the central room and brought back a bundle of firewood. Gu Chengfeng looked at her busy little figure and said, "You rest for a while, I'll keep watch tonight. We'll take turns keeping watch. You sleep for the first half of the night, and I just happen to need to change some medicine." Gu Jiao said and turned to check the splints on the old marquis's limbs. Her time and conditions in the governor's residence were limited, so she only did a simple breaking, and now she had to do it again. Also, his wounds had to be carefully examined. "Is my grandfather okay?" Gu Chengfeng looked at the old marquis and asked. Gu Jiao used shock absorption and fixation on the old marquis's waist and abdomen. The condition of the wound was good, and his blood pressure was gradually returning to normal. It was just that he had a slight fever, and they had to be careful of post-operative infection. "He's fine for now." Gu Jiao said, "You sleep, I'll wake you up later." Gu Chengfeng thought for a while, but still agreed. He reminded her, "Remember to wake me up." "Okay." Gu Jiao nodded. Gu Chengfeng pulled the quilt over himself, but he did not fall asleep. In the flickering firelight, he opened his eyes and stared at Gu Jiao without blinking. Gu Jiao had just finished fixing the old marquis's left arm. She turned to look at him and said, "Is there anything else?" He lay on the bed and looked at her from this angle. She was still petite, but her shadow on the wall was illuminated by the firelight. Gu Chengfeng opened his mouth and asked, "Do you have any family?" "At your house." Gu Jiao was silent for a moment, then said, "I don't know." In terms of blood, she had them, but in terms of emotions, she did not. They did not want her. They did not want her as a daughter, nor did they want her as a sister. She did not want them either. How could a person not even know if she had a family? Was she an orphan? Gu Chengfeng felt that this was very likely, so he did not ask further. He cleared his throat and said, "Then don't go back. It's quite good here." Gu Jiao thought, "I don't want to go back, and I can't go back either." "Well, it's also quite good," Gu Chengfeng said vaguely. "What did you say?" Gu Jiao did not hear the words in the middle. "Nothing." Gu Chengfeng pulled the quilt over his head. "Stupid sister." Gu Chengfeng fell asleep not long after covering himself with the quilt. Gu Jiao gave Gu Chengfeng an intravenous drip and helped the old marquis take care of all the splints. Outside the house, goose feather-like snow rustled down. The howling cold wind had dissipated at some point, leaving only the dancing snow in the night. It was completely silent. In the latter half of the night, Gu Jiao did not wake Gu Chengfeng up. She hugged the red tasseled spear and stood at the door, silently keeping watch for the entire night. The flying snow was in front of her eyes, and the person she needed to protect was behind her. At the first glimmer of dawn, Gu Chengfeng woke up. He had not slept so well in a long time, and he felt that all the vitality in his body had been restored. He opened his eyes and saw the light coming in through the window. Only then did he remember keeping watch for the latter half of the night. Did he oversleep, or did that girl not wake him at all? He looked around. His grandfather was still lying on the other bamboo bed, but Gu Jiao was nowhere to be seen. Where's that girl? Gu Chengfeng lifted the quilt and sat up. He was injured after all, and there was a pulling pain coming from all parts of his body. He frowned and relaxed his movements slightly. He first looked at his grandfather. His grandfather was still unconscious, but his breathing sounded smoother than last night. Grandfather and he were both injured. Nothing must happen to that girl. Gu Jiao had gone to look for food. In this hunter's house, there was nothing to fill her stomach other than a pile of leftover food that had been left out for God knows how many days. In addition, the firewood was almost burned out, so she entered the nearby forest. She picked up some dried branches, but did not catch any prey. She planned to carry the branches back to the house first. Just as she turned around, a person slowly walked over from the other side of the forest. Looking at the direction, he was also heading towards the small wooden house. Could it be the owner of the small wooden house? That person was wearing animal skin and a felt hat. Gu Jiao could not see his face clearly, but she felt that the other person's figure was tall and sturdy. He walked in the snow up to his thighs, as if he was walking on flat ground. He was an expert. Gu Jiao made a judgment in her heart. Gu Jiao walked towards the small wooden house with the branches in her arms. The two, unexpectedly, met on the way. It was not until they met face to face that Gu Jiao finally saw his face clearly. And he also saw Gu Jiao. Both of them were startled at the same time. Digression. Almost 5,000 votes. When I woke up, I hoped to break through 5,000 votes. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that cannot be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_896/1096245543. HTML Genius memorized this site's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuga mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. You're tuning in to the Echo Reads YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.